public service in which he refused to be pigeonholed. And what's so fascinating about what's going to occur is that during the campaign, or at least early on in the campaign, we always heard Joe Biden talk about himself as a transitional candidate because he is old. Now, as a president, he's going to have to be transformational because so much needs to be done in this country, whether it's about COVID, whether it's about the economy, whether it's about race, whether it's about climate. You can go down the list. So this man who was the youngest man, one of the youngest, I should say, ever elected to the United States Senate, will now be the oldest man ever to take the presidential oath.
That's America.
Think of that. Think of that.
David?
First of all, let me say, watching Wolf make that announcement threw me back to when I was in the war room in 2008 at the campaign headquarters, and I heard him say the words that Barack Obama would be president of the United States, and I was overwhelmed with emotion. I'm sure that's the feeling of people over in Biden's headquarters and many people across the country, and Van just so eloquently and movingly expressed that. Joe Biden, we tend to correct in our elections for the deficiencies of the person in that office. And in this case, those deficiencies went to character, went to decency, went to a lack of empathy. And these are qualities, as Gloria said, that Joe Biden has in abundance. And that made him the right candidate to run against Donald Trump. I think when he said last night that he wanted to bring the country together, that he wanted to be the president of all Americans, that he fundamentally believes that. He grew up that way in politics. But we should also recognize today, and I'm sure Rick will speak to this, that there are a lot of Americans who think that will see this as a gut punch because we are in a very divided country. And for all the tasks that Joe Biden faces now, President-elect Biden, whether it's dealing with the virus or dealing with the economy or myriad other problems, the greatest challenge is going to be to deal with a deeply divided country and try and find a common language and a common set of concerns that we can work on together, even if we disagree on many, many issues. And that, I so fervently hope for the country that he is successful in moving us forward in that way.
Rick, do you think that's possible?
Well, first, let me just congratulate Vice President Biden. He looks like he's going to win this election. I know there's a lot of conservatives, the White House, Republicans, who still think this race isn't over. That they're going to continue this effort to determine whether there were sufficient irregularities in the election to overturn this. So I think that's going to continue. How long it will continue, as David and I talked about yesterday, will depend upon the margins in some of these states. I mean, it's Pennsylvania. It was just called. If Pennsylvania ends up at 50 or 100,000 votes, it's going to be very, very difficult. If let's say Arizona and Nevada, if you're not fighting just in one state, if you're fighting in 3 or 4 states, it's going to be harder to figure out how you can put an effort together to be successful. So from the Republican point of view, we're not convinced it's over yet, and we're going to wait and see how the rest of these states play out. We have, as you can see from the board, a lot of still very, very narrow races. So let me just say, there's not the feeling yet that this is over. Obviously, Van, very moved, and I can understand how people are feeling the way you're feeling right now. I think, as we've talked about before, it's a very divided country, and I think a lot of folks on our side are feeling the fears that you're feeling, that you have been feeling the past 4 years. On the economic side, people are afraid that Joe Biden is going to do what Boris Johnson is doing and Angela Merkel are doing in Europe and shut down the economy. There are a lot of blue-collar people, and again, we've been talking about this, that a lot of blue-collar Americans felt that neither political party really cared about them, and that they were the ones who were losing their jobs. They were the ones who, whether it was technology or trade or globalism, that they were sort of left behind by both political parties, Republicans for big business and Democrats for tech and the environment and all these other issues, and that the working class people were sort of left behind. And so they're worried about, going back to global agenda and not worrying about what's going on here in America. There are a lot of people of faith who are worried about religious liberty. They're worried about whether there's going to be, speech codes and hate speech and a limit on what they're able to say. So as much as people are concerned, I understand you're feeling relieved. There's a lot of people now are on our side who are feeling concerned.
Van, just before we go, just the challenge ahead for this president is enormous.
Yeah, it is, and I think that people should take very seriously what the senator just said. The grievances and those working class folks who felt that neither party cared about them weren't wrong. People were sacrificed for an agenda that didn't help a lot of people. And I know poor folks in Appalachia and poor folks in South Central, they got the same problems. And culture wars notwithstanding, there's a moment here. Do your lawsuits, that's your right. But there is a moment here where we can reset. And I think Joe Biden wants us to reset. And I will do everything I can. We got a lot of fear and a lot of pain. We got a lot of promise, too. And so do your guys. And if we can sit down at the same table, we can get something done together. Gloria?
I think that the country has just elected a man who is the polar opposite of the man who currently occupies the office. And his norm-shattering presidency, which I think we can all agree it was in one way or another, is going to give way to a presidency that will be all about respecting norms and institutions and making them better and uniting the country, not dividing the country. And I think as Trump becomes the first president, I think in almost 30 years, not to win a second term, it will be hard for him to accept. It is hard for him to accept. But in the end, I hope he is gracious and can muster some graciousness when it comes to Joe Biden and him becoming the next president.
Let's go back to Jake.
Well, it has been quite an ordeal covering the election these last few days, and I know a lot of people out there have been eager for us to count the votes and make calls even before we were ready to do so. I want to make sure that people understand that we were taking our time because we wanted to be 100% sure of the projection. And, it's interesting, Abby, because while President Trump has been out there attacking the very fundamentals of democracy, he's been benefiting from the counting going on in Arizona. I want to go to Jeff Zeleny right now, who is covering the Biden campaign for us, of course. Jeff, obviously, Joe Biden and Senator Kamala Harris have been eagerly awaiting the media to make these projections. What is the plan?
Jake, good morning. Joe Biden, I'm told, was at his home here in Wilmington, Delaware, when he saw the news that CNN and other networks projected him as the 46th president of the United States. He had been anticipating this moment with patience, perhaps much more patience than some of his Democratic supporters. But now he is looking ahead to the speech that he will deliver here this evening. It will indeed be a speech for history. It will also be the first step in his quest to try and unify this country. We've heard glimpses of what he is going to say. We've heard these words before, but the weight of these words he will deliver here this evening will be the first test for his quest to unify this nation. He said it last night, Jake. He said, "We may be opponents, but we are not enemies. We are Americans." That will be a central theme of his message here, and it will be at the same spot where he, of course, accepted the Democratic presidential nomination. But this campaign has changed dramatically since he started running it. This country has changed dramatically since he served 8 years as the vice president. But he will use all of that learning, all of that history from his years in the Senate, right here from Delaware, and of course at his time in the White House to deliver that speech. I am told by friends who have spoken to him over the last several days that he is going to give President Trump a bit of time. He is going to give Republicans a bit of time to digest this before he goes forward with his transition plans. First and foremost in his transition is going to be focusing on coronavirus. The challenges that are facing this country are steep. We've sort of set aside these daily cases of coronavirus to watch election returns, but he has been getting briefings every day, sometimes a few times a day on this. That, I'm told, is going to be his first step. But for tonight, at least, he's going to deliver a speech, and his supporters and advisors are all already sending the message out. This is not a time for gloating. This is a time to accept and feel and celebrate a victory There will be fireworks here, I'm told, this evening. There's also, I'm told, going to be what is scheduled to be a light show with several drones, perhaps dozens or scores of drones in the air, delivering a type of light show here. And after that, the hard work begins. So for now, I'm told we are not expected to hear or see the former vice president before that address this evening. That could always change. Of course, we might see a message from him on social media, but he is going to be delivering this speech that this stage has been waiting for the last several days. Of course, we should always also point out we will hear from Senator Harris this evening here as well. A history-making move in its own right. Tremendous move for the country, of course, and we'll see their partnership together beginning here. So even as he's taking in this victory, Jake, I can tell you the transition is already underway. We are not likely to see any announcements in the coming, at least the coming hours, but in the coming days we certainly will, as he begins to assume his role as president-elect, will be the 46th president of the United States.
And
Jake?
Jeff, for people who are just tuning in for the first time to find out that Joe Biden is now President-elect Joe Biden, and Senator Kamala Harris is now Vice President-elect Kamala Harris. It's probably a good time for Republicans to learn how to pronounce her name. I would like to note that if they are confused by the honking going on behind you, that is a mark of the new COVID era, where Joe Biden would have drive-in rallies, and instead of applauding and cheering, people would honk.
Right. And Jake, it was at this parking lot right behind me here. We saw one of the first drive-in rallies during the Democratic convention this summer in August. It was really an extraordinary moment as he was inside the Chase Center here delivering that acceptance speech. There were hundreds of cars outside with people, coming out of their convertible rooftops or sitting on their hoods honking. And then we've really seen that throughout the last several months of campaigning. So that is what we will see here tonight. But the honking is the sound of the new applause. But Jake, I can also say hundreds of people gathered here last evening in Wilmington, Delaware. I assume the same will happen this evening. People from Delaware wanting to see their favorite son out giving a speech. So it was one of the largest Democratic gatherings that I've really seen since this pandemic began. So the Biden campaign, of course, will have their official event here at the drive-in rally, but there are people gathering here in Delaware. But Jake, we should point out that he will also be the oldest president elected. 2 weeks from yesterday, he turned 78 years old. But that is just one of the history-making things. Also, the second U.S. president who's Catholic. So he often goes to Mass or to church here in Wilmington before a big moment in his life. I would expect that today as well, Jake. So many moments of history. Senator Harris, of course, making many, many moments of history here. She will speak first this evening, I'm told, and then Joe Biden will speak after. Again, both having a unifying message here. This is more than just a speech. This is the first step in their next chapter of trying to lead this country through this challenge and turmoil, Jake.
All right, Jeff Zeleny, thanks so much. It is such a such a historic moment, such a moment of import. The idea of democracy, that the people get to decide every few years if they like what they have or if they want to stick with it or if they want to change. The American people resoundingly, with what looks like a popular vote margin of at least 4 or 5 million votes for Joe Biden, and also what looks like it will be ultimately a significant win in the Electoral College as well. The American people saying to Donald Trump, thanks, but you should go. We want new leadership. And Joe Biden could not be more of a polar opposite from Donald Trump.
No, you're exactly right. One of the many fantastic storylines, and this is obviously this is an objective thing to say, of this election is how many people engaged, how many people went out and voted. It is just remarkable. Not only is Joe Biden somebody who has gotten more of the popular vote than anybody in history, as far as we know. Donald Trump also. I want to show,
sure. Let me interrupt for 1 second. That's right outside the convention center in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Philadelphia, a city that Donald Trump has been attacking unfairly for a long time. He even got into a fight with the Philadelphia Eagles in 2018. After the Eagles won the Super Bowl. Philadelphia delivering the margin of victory for Joe Biden that allowed CNN to call Pennsylvania and then, therefore, call the presidency for Joe Biden. Philadelphians realizing the significant role they played in this election, taking to the streets in celebration in the birthplace of liberty, we should say, in this country.
Yeah.
I'm sorry for interrupting.
No, that's okay.
I had to say hi to my friends.
And I completely understand. And by the way, that's happening in a lot of the cities around this country. I'm getting texts from friends who are saying that they're out and about and they're hearing cheering and honking. Let's be clear, that is obviously happening in about half the country right now, because the other half, as I was mentioning before, less than half, because otherwise Joe Biden wouldn't be president-elect right now. Donald Trump did extraordinarily well. It's just that more people voted for Joe Biden. And there are still about 70 million people, a little under that right now, who Joe Biden is going to have to find a way to reach out to. He says it all the time. He talks about being the president, not just of blue states, of red states, but of the United States, borrowing a famous line from Barack Obama. But now the tough part comes. Now he's got to find a way to actually make that a reality. And it's not going to be easy, because this polarized country is going to take a very, very, very long time to heal.
Yeah, I mean, look, this is absolutely an incredibly polarized country. But I've been sitting here and I've been thinking about how difficult this year has been for so many Americans, and it hasn't been felt evenly in this country. There are millions of Americans who were disproportionately hurt by this president's failure to deal with this coronavirus crisis. They were devastated economically. They were dying at disproportionate rates, getting disease and sickness at disproportionate rates. And I do think that they voted in their interest. They voted for their lives. And that's one of the reasons why you saw Joe Biden successfully bringing out Democrats in this election, because Democrats who are more likely to be Black and Hispanic and non-white were disproportionately hurt by what was going on in this country over the last 8 months. And, you know, I also think about the fact that we've had so many Americans really acting heroically when their government would not act for them. Doctors and nurses and EMTs. And now this week we're seeing election workers literally risking their lives to simply count the votes. And at the end of the day, I think the American people's voices have been heard. No matter what happens in Washington, we wait for their votes. Yep. We call the election based on how they voted. Yeah. And millions of Americans who have really suffered, especially this year, said today that they wanted something completely different.
And that suffering, particularly when you're talking about COVID, isn't going to go away anytime soon. Joe Biden says he has a plan. When he actually gets to the point where he raises his right hand and takes the office, he's going to be able to implement that plan. But, you know, it is not going to be an easy task. What is also really palpable right now is that people are exhausted. People are exhausted by the chaos. It's not just the substance of what needs to be done. It's just the feeling of wanting to get some rest, wanting to not wake up and say, what is happening on Twitter right now? What is happening, in a world that is going to bust norms in a way that maybe even people who voted for Donald Trump didn't expect to go that far. And so Biden gives a promise of normalcy, again, getting to that point when you have so many people who really like President Trump still making that heard in this election is going to be fascinating to watch.
You know, a lot has been said and done about the fact that this was, in 2016, was the first time Donald Trump ever ran for any office. And I want to contrast that with the fact that this is the third time Joe Biden has run for president. The third time. The last time that a president won on their third attempt was Ronald Reagan, who ran in 68, ran in 76, and then finally won in 1980. There is also a special kind of pluck, of gumption necessary to think that, okay, I ran for president in 1988, and I didn't even make it to 1988. I dropped out in 1987. Yeah. Okay, I ran for president in 2008. I dropped out immediately after Iowa, where I got clobbered. I'm going to give it one more shot. And it worked. It worked this time.
It did.
I mean, it is a lesson not just about politicians Now every politician is going to run for president at least 3 times because if Joe Biden can do it, why can't they do it? But it's also just a lesson for people out there watching.
Don't give up.
Don't give up. If you believe in yourself, you can actually achieve what you want to achieve despite all odds.
You're exactly right. And he had given up. I mean, in 2016, when it was made clear to him that this is Hillary Clinton's time, he thought it was over. He didn't think that there was going to be another opportunity, and it was genuine. I mean, he has said that, and it isn't just spin. It wasn't just, oh, I feel like I need to do this for the country, that's why I'm coming out in the 2020 cycle. It was real, but it was because what he saw happening that he felt like he maybe singularly can make a difference, and that is probably one of the biggest reasons why he beat out the biggest and most diverse field in the Democratic Party.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because every politician thinks that they are the one who is chosen to be the person of the moment. And it just so happens that Joe Biden was the guy for the moment.
Right.
And he had to wait until the very end of his political life, his time in public life, for that to actually be true. But it's because Joe Biden had spent a lifetime building up this reputation as the everyman's man. And you heard David Axelrod say earlier, they parked him in the upper Midwest back in 2008 just to be a relatable force for people who were being asked to vote for the first potentially the first black president of the United States. So he's been in this position before, but I do think it has taken his entire lifetime for him to have the credibility to withstand what came at him, which was unprecedented attacks against his family, among other things.
Let's check back with Jeff Zeleny, who's covering the Biden campaign for us. He's in Wilmington, Delaware. Jeff?
Jake, we have just heard the first words from Joe Biden, the president-elect of the United States, sending out a message on social media, on Twitter. Let's take a moment and read this together. He says, "America, I'm honored that you have chosen me to lead our great country. The work ahead of us will be hard, but I promise you this. I will be a president for all Americans, whether you voted for me or not. I will keep the faith that you have placed in me." And those are the first words from Joe Biden here as these results are coming in, as he's taking them in his home here in Wilmington. Those are his first words, and also putting out a statement or a video as well to accompany this. And this is something that it really is going to be a central theme of his speech tonight, I'm told. This is going to be something he will talk as well about his mandate, his popular vote total. And I'm told now by my producer, Bonnie Cap, that we also have a full statement from the former vice president. I'm going to read that to you as well. He says this: "I am honored and humbled by the trust the American people have placed in me and in Vice President-elect Harris. In the face of unprecedented obstacles, a record number of Americans have voted, proving once again that democracy beats deep in the heart of America." He goes on to say, with the campaign over, it's time to put the anger and the harsh rhetoric behind us and come together as a nation. It's time for America to unite and to heal. We are the United States of America, Mr. Biden says, and there is nothing we can't do if we do it together. So those, of course, the first words from Joe Biden as he is taking in this historic moment for him here in his home of Wilmington. And that statement, of course, will be the central backbone of his challenge and the backbone of his speech that he will deliver here this evening. But Jake, I am told that something else that Mr. Biden has been doing, and has been doing for several days, is thinking about the challenge ahead in trying to reach out to Republicans. If the Senate of the United States holds in Republican hands, he will need that old friendship with Mitch McConnell to help him build his cabinet. That is something that Democrats may not want to hear at the moment, but if the Senate majority holds in Republican hands, he will need that for governing. So among the phone calls that the president elect is going to be receiving here today, he'll be getting world leader calls, no question, and sending out calls. Mitch McConnell remains an important part of this equation as we go forward. So we'll let you know if we hear when those two old friends in a Washington respective friendship speak. But you'll remember in the Obama administration, Mitch McConnell and Vice President Joe Biden cut many deals that frustrated many on both sides of both aisles. So that is one of the dynamics at play. But for now, at least, This is the tone that Joe Biden is trying to set. So look for Democrats to talk again about that mandate in the popular vote. As this popular vote continues to be tallied across the country, he could be surpassing 4 million, 5 million, even more than that in terms of popular votes. And if these states hold in Georgia, Arizona, et cetera, they do believe they have a mandate. You can hear horns honking behind me here in Wilmington. I suspect there'll be a lot more of that to come. Jake?
Yeah, Jeff, I mean, we'll see how much, assuming he is the Senate Majority Leader, Mitch McConnell, we'll see how much he actually intends to work with Joe Biden. He may have cut deals with Joe Biden, Dana, but let's also remember he was determined to make Barack Obama a one-term president. He did not succeed, but he was not somebody who worked particularly well across the aisle with President Obama. We'll see how he does with President Biden.
And we have a tweet in from Kamala Harris, now Vice President-elect Harris. And here's what she said. This is the first thing she has said since having that title. This election is about so much more than Joe Biden or me. It's about the soul of America and our willingness to fight for it. We have a lot of work ahead of us. Let's get started. And I'm looking at the tweet here on my iPad, and it's on top of a video, which is, from the campaign with just a series of regular Americans, very diverse group.
Yeah. I'm sitting here and I'm thinking about a little bit about 4 years ago, and the reaction 4 years ago to President Trump being elected was that we need to listen to the people who elected him. I think the lesson today is that we need to listen to the people who just elected Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. It is the expectation of this country, contrary to what has happened in the 4 years, that the president leads all Americans. So that is no surprise that you would hear that from Joe Biden. But I do think that we do need to listen to the majority of Americans who voted against Donald Trump 4 years ago and voted for Joe Biden now, that they are saying that they want decency back. They're saying that they want, as you said, normalcy back, Dana. They want to be able to breathe again in some way. And I do think that as much as Joe Biden knows he has to reach across the aisle, I'm reading this and I'm reading what he is saying in his statement, and it says effectively, we're gonna go back to being, we're gonna go back to decency being the norm in America, not some kind of exceptional, some exception to the norm.
Yeah, and it takes two to tango. We'll see how much congressional Republicans are willing to meet President-elect Biden and Vice President-elect Harris on this field of decency and normalcy. It's not just President Trump that has been eroding norms of decency and
He's
truth.
had a lot of help.
He's had a lot of help from a lot of people on Capitol Hill, and we'll see whether or not they want to come back to planet Earth and be good boys and girls and be decent and normal and adhere to facts and truth. I would say, as a journalist trying to uphold, along with everyone here, those norms. Come on in, the water's fine, but we'll see what they're ready to do. Anderson?
And Jake, work of the transition has already begun, obviously, for the Biden campaign. David Axelrod, I mean, they have been preparing for this for multiple different possibilities.
Yeah, and look, the thing is that what he does from here on in these next days and weeks are important substantively, but they're also important symbolically. Who he calls, where he goes, the issues that he highlights, the words that he uses are all going to be examined closely. And I guarantee you that a lot of thought has been given to how to orchestrate these next few days to send a strong signal about how he intends to govern. So making those calls to Mitch McConnell, making those calls to which foreign leaders are you calling? What is the nature of those conversations? Where are the first places you choose to go? What are your first appointments? I expect you'll see very quickly first his White House staff. Probably it'll be a few weeks if he follows the pattern, certainly of the administration we were part of. It'll be the end of November before we'll hear about cabinet members. But all of them are not just substantively important, but symbolically important. And a lot of thought has gone into it, I'm sure.
Just to follow up on the foreign leaders, I was told during the campaign, I asked a senior advisor, who is Joe Biden talking to? Which foreign leaders is he talking to? He said, we're not talking to any. They're calling us during the campaign, but we are not we have told them we are not going to speak with them until he's elected, because they felt, given what had gone on with the Trump campaign, Flynn, General Flynn, et cetera, that they could not do that. Now, he will clearly be reaching out to these leaders he was not able to speak with during the election.
But the path ahead, though, I mean, it's not just, Jake was talking about Republicans on Capitol Hill. It's also Democrats and the liberal wing of the party. And, people, you talked about sort of sending signals.
Yeah.
The cabinet choices,
yes,
that's going to be a battle for
I
this
listened
president.
with interest to Abby talking about Kamala Harris as sort of an ambassador to the younger voters, to the left, and so on. That's going to be an enormous pressure, because you have a situation where we'll likely have a divided Congress. You're going to have to make compromises. Biden himself is more moderate than some Democrats would like. And so there's going to be a lot of tension that they have to navigate there. But the bigger one is in the country itself, I think. I think Joe Biden believes with every fiber in his body the words that he is speaking now. I believe in those words. But it does require, Rick talked earlier about, there are a lot of Republicans who don't necessarily believe that he has won yet, or they question whether he has won yet. We have gone through presidency after presidency where half the country views the president as illegitimate. That is corrosive, and we have to try and find a way through that.
Yeah,
And we just heard, Hillary Clinton has just tweeted, and she said the voters have spoken, and they have chosen Joe Biden and Kamala Harris to be our next president and vice president. It's a history-making ticket, a repudiation of Trump, and a new page for America. Thank you to everyone who helped make this happen. Onward together. Interesting tweet from Hillary Clinton, who finally gets to say Trump has been repudiated, from the woman who, of course, lost to Donald Trump. And she and Joe Biden, as you know, David, have not, Joe Biden didn't get in the race last time because Hillary Clinton was in the race and he held back. And now she is congratulating him for winning this. And also, she did not become the first woman president, but now congratulating the first woman vice president.
Well, look, there's two things that are happening. One is, at the top, Biden is trying to figure out how to get the transition done. But to your point, there is a big movement that expects to be treated with respect and inclusion.
You're talking about the left.
I'm talking about the left and the grassroots, not just the left, but the grassroots of this party, the people that you see out here. This was the Avengers versus Thanos. Okay, this was not just a mano kind of a situation. You had every grassroots organization standing up, and so groups like Mi Gente, Lucha, Mi Familia Vota, the Latino Victory Fund, Maria Teresa Kumar and her organization, that's the Latino grassroots. They expect to be having a seat at the table. Native American, by the way, you see those little blue dots in Arizona? Those are Native American reservations. The Native American community played a tremendous role. The Native Organizers Alliance, Intertribal Council, the NACARE. These are groups that expect to be treated with respect because they are responsible for the victory. And then also, the African American community threw down. And you have a new infrastructure in the black community. Colorofchange.org, which I helped to start a long time ago, has become a superpower. And also, by the way, defending this victory, Vanita Gupta from the Leadership Conference on Civil Rights, Sherilyn Ifill from the NAACP Legal Defense Fund are defending this victory right now in court. So you have a massive movement around Biden that's going to want to be respected and seen and included, and not just left, but bottom up. And I think part of what has to happen is the bottom-up inclusion from the left does not have to come at the expense of bottom-up inclusion from working folks and Trump country. Those things can go side by side.
When it comes to cabinet selections, I mean, there had been talk about does Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren, do they want to be on the cabinet? That's something which, I mean, how much control do Senate Republicans, Mitch McConnell, have over that, you think?
Look, I traditionally, although that changed candidly in the last 4 years, but traditionally, the Senate gives the president the cabinet he wants.
Okay.
And unless there's people that are clearly unqualified or have ethical problems or other things. So I think Mitch McConnell and the Republicans will give the president the cabinet he wants. So I don't think that's going to be a big issue. Can I just make one point? Because everyone's talking about unity, and I think Americans clearly would love to see this country a little bit more divided. But everyone seems to think that unity is accomplished by tone. That, if you just are nicer, and if you don't say nice things, that you aren't mean to people, that somehow you're going to unify the country. That's not enough. I mean, I'm not saying that's not a good thing. It is a good thing. And you've heard me criticize the president for his tone. Tone is important. But I will tell you, in my opinion, what will be the biggest determiner as whether Joe Biden will be able to accomplish unity is the state of Georgia. Because the state of Georgia in the next 2 months is going to go through an election process that will determine who controls the United States Senate. And if one or two Republicans get elected from the state of Georgia, Joe Biden has a much greater chance of unity because he'll be forced to work together with Republicans to get things done.
I agree with you on that.
If Georgia, for some reason, elects 2 Democratic senators, you will see the left, and Van has every right to say they were the ones that were the energy, they were the ones that deserve it. But they're going to be pushing for D.C. statehood. They're going to be pushing for packing the court. They're going to be pushing for Puerto Rican statehood. I mean, you're going to see a big tax increase. You're going to see things that will not unify the country that Joe Biden is going to have to push for if he has the means to do it. So, Georgia, you're on my mind. And so I'm hopeful,
sing, all right?
I'm hopeful that the state of Georgia will do the right thing and provide an opportunity for unity.
Can we just say something about these pictures we're looking at? I mean, it's kind of remarkable, these people who have taken
it's
to the
interesting.
streets.
I mean, obviously, look, in any election, there's going to be, people who are very happy, and there's going to be people who are not very happy. And so we're certainly seeing people who are very happy coming out into the streets in Washington, D.C. by the White House. The sense of relief that you sort of get from a lot of people who are coming out is particularly interesting as sort of, I guess it's a hope that of a changed, to Rick's point, tone and obviously policies as well.
Go ahead.
I think policy is going to be hugely important, but tone, I think, and Van talked about this so eloquently earlier, is the sort of sense of exhaustion and not having to wake up every day wondering what's going to happen because something's been tweeted that's so divisive, that somebody has been called a name. This president has been calling Joe Biden all kinds of names throughout this, and that was sort of something you got used to in a way. And there was so much coming at people every day that what you may be seeing there is some sort of steam coming out of the teapot.
I just want to say, go ahead.
Just make one point on it.
At some point I want to talk.
You're speaking for people who, I hate to say it, are the elites in our culture.
Oh,
You're
please
speaking
don't
of
say that.
people
I shouldn't have let you talk. Can I say something? You can insult us in a minute. I want to brag on these people for 1 second, if you don't mind, Senator. Please.
Let me just make a real quick point.
Okay.
When you talk about the president and how tough he is, and how you're talking to people who watch CNN, who watch the news,
It's not
who
true.
are constantly in there. Most people are living their lives and not really paying attention.
That's
to
not
what's
true.
But he lost by 4 million
My point
votes.
is, tone is not as important for them. Policies that affect their lives are
Of
more.
course, but
Rick,
I'm going to talk. I don't like what you're saying. I don't like that, and I think we're going in the wrong direction. The tone mattered to my children.
Matters to
And my
me.
children are not elites.
I don't disagree.
Listen, this was. I think the big mistake that the Trump administration made, for all the good that they did on criminal justice and opportunity zones and other stuff that I was proud of them for, is that they failed to understand that, actions speak louder than words if you're a normal person. But when you're the president of the United States, your words speak louder than your actions. And his words every day made America a nastier place and a more toxic place. And what you're seeing here is this is not just coming for today. The politics of joy as a weapon. Groups like Sankofa, cultural groups, were going to the polls with music. They were going to the polls with entertainment, and this was a part of the resistance, a beautiful part of the resistance. And I just want to say, you trying to cut me off?
No, go.
So I just want to say that there are a couple of things to get us to unity. Tone is very, very important because when people are just getting smashed upside the head, they can't think clearly. So that's got to go away. And then on the policy part, I think that anti-poverty, I think that criminal justice, mental health, addiction, infrastructure, family leave. There are economic policies that can bring us together. There's going to be some cultural war stuff that pulls us apart. But I think we have a responsibility to put forward those economic ideas and support this president.
David, do you expect to hear from Joe Biden today?
Yeah, Jeff said we won't hear from him until this evening when he speaks, and that's probably appropriate. I think the reason they sent the messages out they did was as a placeholder until he speaks to the country. But I just wanted to Rick's point. I think you're wrong about this. I think there were some portion of people who agreed with Donald Trump on policy, but simply couldn't tolerate the way he behaved and the way he treated people. Gloria used the word exhaustion. I heard that word, in focus groups, and I just heard it used so often. It was a chore because you had to wake up every day wondering about the tweet or the tantrum or the fight that was going to happen that day. And it was wearing on people. And even some people who are inclined to support Donald Trump on policy just could not tolerate it.
I agree. I agree with that. I'm not arguing with that. I talk about that a lot here. I guess.
But it wasn't just the elites. All I want to say is you got people who were working in restaurants, people who were working in hair salons, who the tone would affect them. It would come into their lives, not just the elites.
I guess my point is that the vast majority of Americans don't wake up every day listening to what the president has to say. That's my point. And that,
it was inescapable.
That the people here represented on this panel, we listen to the president every day, and we're skewed by that because most Americans don't. And I'm just saying, most Americans are much more concerned, not that they liked what the president was saying. I'm not saying they liked what the president was saying, but I'm saying that they're less concerned about that than they are about the policies that happen.
Let's
it's a profound misunderstanding on your part.
A little bit later, just in terms of what
Biden.
What you expect to see happening today from Biden, from Kamala Harris?
I think that they've gotten a head start. They've been involved in transition work for quite some time. I don't know whether he's going to announce who's going to be in his. I just am hearing from somebody on the campaign. Hold on. I'd asked about what they were going to do in the transition, and I was told, kind of excited right now. We'll get back to you. So I think Biden knows on his major positions, national security advisor, who he's going to appoint.
It's also a remarkable moment. I mean, just to the sentiment that person you're talking to on the campaign expressed, for a campaign which really was not a campaign in any traditional sense that we are used to, and was also such a gamble in terms of choosing not to have people going out knocking door to door, and not to have the candidate out there, and to see President Trump out there and still resist that.
Well, look, I think it goes further back than that. I think it goes to the beginning of the campaign. They had an inspiration, and their inspiration was that the country wanted what Biden was off. The country wanted to be healed. They wanted to essentially fire Donald Trump, that he was the counterpoint to that. That was right, and many of us sat on this panel and other panels over the primary campaigns when he was in some degree of distress, wondering if it would happen, because he wasn't the perfect candidate for the emerging Democratic electorate, and it wasn't clear he could survive it. But what became clear in the general election, and particularly when the virus struck, was that those qualities of Biden were most resonant. And the decision not to do the rallies, and the decision, I think they paid some price for it, actually, but the symbolism of not doing it, the symbolism of him treating it seriously, I think ultimately netted out for them.
And don't forget, one of Biden's top advisors is Ron Klain, who was the Ebola czar. Ron Klain could well be the next chief of staff. And they were getting their guidance not only from doctors, but from Ron, who had been through an awful lot of this with infectious disease. And I think it was a risk, but it also provided this different view from Donald Trump that people could watch. And I think that became important because Biden was listening to science and Donald Trump was listening to, I don't know, Scott Atlas? I have no idea.
Go back to Jake and Wolf in Washington. Jake?
Thanks, Anderson. We're just watching the scenes of celebration at cities throughout the country. This is Washington, D.C. Right now. And I think it has to be said, a lot of this is relief.
Oh,
A lot of this is not, oh, great, now the minimum wage will go up to $15 an hour, which it probably won't because Republicans still control the Senate. A lot of this is not necessarily about the Green New Deal. A lot of this is, I'm not going to have a president much longer who dislikes immigrants or says things that are racist
or doesn't believe in science.
Doesn't believe in science or isn't
these,
doing everything he can do to try to protect us from the virus.
Look at all of these young people. I mean, they're in the streets. We were just showing what is now Black Lives Matter Plaza. We are watching the continuation of what began over the summer of an enormous amount of activism in this country showing up in these very same places with some of these very same people who came out to say, we want things to change. And there's been so much talk about whether there is enthusiasm for Joe Biden or more enthusiasm for Donald Trump. What you're seeing is, yes, relief, but enthusiasm for a new day, a change, and a change particularly for young people who, you know, it's not, as Rick Santorum was saying, just about tone. They do care about policy. They do believe in science, and they do believe that climate change is an important thing. They do believe that systemic racism exists. That is about policy, and I think that is why you're seeing them in the streets.
It's like a pressure valve is being released slowly across these cities. And I say cities on purpose because this is where this is happening in the largely Democratic places. But I think Senator Santorum has done us a tremendous service in walking us through what's going on, particularly among Republicans in Pennsylvania, where he, place he knows so well. But these are not elites. It's not about being a lead or not a lead. This is about, and not about beliefs. This is about a particular feeling of a yearning for normalcy, and for a lot of people, about their children and wanting their children to feel comfortable with having the president as a role model.
Yeah.
And I want to say, we need to, as we watch these scenes of celebration, pardon me, we're also seeing people wearing masks.
Exactly.
And mostly wearing masks. They are not socially distancing. I hate to be a scold here, but we just had the highest day of infections in the United States. I believe yesterday was 125,000 Americans with new coronavirus infections. That was the third straight day of more than 100,000 infections. It's good to see people wearing masks, although for some of them they're slipping off their face. People also need to socially distance themselves, and the masks are significant, though. I mean, they are the thing that doctors say is the most important.
But I can see Sanjay Gupta having a lot of heartburn right now.
Yeah, there are a lot of public health officials watching this right now and feeling agita, feeling concern because of the crowds. But again, at least they are wearing masks. It also underscores another reason why people are happy with this victory is because President Trump surrendered to the virus. I mean, like we praised him on the show for Operation Warp Speed, looking for a vaccine, and for the sped up approval process when it comes to therapeutics. But when it came to trying to control the infection, he gave up, and he led the charge against it. And you were talking about all the people who are out there for policy reasons. They want criminal justice reform. They want the Green New Deal, or at least some effort to combat climate change. And I don't disagree with that at all. But I think sometimes it's also just more basic. The number one job of a president is to protect the American people. When it comes to the coronavirus, the president failed. It's not the job of the president of the United States to necessarily unite the American people. It would be nice if that was a job.
Yep.
That's certainly what Joe Biden thinks his job is. Donald Trump thought his job was to divide and conquer. After George Floyd was killed, murdered by police, there was a moment there where it looked like President Trump got it. That moment quickly disappeared, and he was back to retweeting smears of a dead man, smears of George Floyd. And I think that's also part of it. Look, we contain multitudes, right? I mean, like, people can be out there celebrating for any number of reasons, but like we're in the middle of a pandemic. We're in the middle of a time of racial injustice and reconciliation, and the president didn't lead, and these people want someone who will, and whether or not that's Joe Biden, they know it wasn't going to be Donald Trump.
Yeah, and the fact that you rightly pointed out that what we're seeing isn't the safest thing in the world for people to be out there. It is great that they're wearing masks, but the fact that we are seeing people in 2020 in the streets, almost all masked, is such a stark illustration of the task that Joe Biden has ahead of him. That, yes, he has been preparing. He has been getting briefings even this week as he waited for the results of this election. But having a plan and executing it are two very, very different things. But one of the reasons why he got the nomination and ultimately won the presidency, I firmly believe, is because he actually has the experience of doing things like this, of taking the government and all of the parts of the government and using it to create a program and a plan to address this thing in a way that, frankly, yes, President Trump was on it on the therapeutics, has been on it pushing for vaccines, and Joe Biden and the American people are likely going to benefit from that. But the fact that the president refused to wear masks, refused to tell people to do so while we wait for those remedies is something that we'll never get back, and a lot of lives that
Not just
we'll never get
refused
back.
to, led the charge against it. He held super spreader events all over the country.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is going to be a transition like no other we've seen in this country, not just because of what President Trump may or may not do, but because we are entering a phase in this country where the virus is surging and people are looking for direction. And will Joe Biden step into that gap? And if he will, how will he do it? I think is going to be such a big question for him. But I do want to raise one thing that just is coming up here.
Can I just take 1 second to acknowledge that Philadelphia is just,
Your
I think,
people are in the streets.
Wait,
Jake,
are you from Philadelphia?
Jake's people are on the screen right now.
They're very happy.
I do want to bring up one thing, a little bit on a lighter note, but no less important as we talk about how different this is going to be for the next 4 years. Kamala Harris's husband, Doug Emhoff, just tweeted out a photo of the two of them. This is happening on a Saturday midday, so they're in casual clothes going about their lives. But he is now about to be the first second husband of the United States, second gentleman of the United States. I don't know what you want to call it.
Second dude.
Second dude of the United States. But their family, I think, is such an interesting thing. Kamala Harris is a biracial woman, married to a white Jewish man. They have a blended family of stepchildren. This is going to be different in a lot of ways, but just the Harris Emhoff family is, I think, something really extraordinary that this country has not seen. But it will reflect, actually, I think, a real reality for so many Americans who are blended families, who are biracial in many ways. And you're seeing a little bit of that here.
Yeah, and I actually, when I interviewed the now Vice President-elect last month, I think it was, we talked about that, about the fact that she is a stepmother, and she came into her stepchildren's life midstream. They were teenagers, which is not easy. It is not easy to do, and has established a relationship with them and also with her husband's first wife, which is a modern family, which is actually happening more across the country than people realize. And that representation is going to be happening at the highest office in the land. And, people relate to their leaders, not just on a policy level, not just in terms of character, but also on a kind of an emotional level. And that is a new phenomenon that people will be able to see.
And can I just say one more thing about Senator Kamala Harris? And people can have policy disagreements with her, people can have political disagreements with her, whatever, that's all fair game. There was an attempt by a lot of people on the right to smear her personally, to go after her personal life, to use the most vile, misogynist, sexist tropes and words to attack her. I mean, people like Rush Limbaugh. I mean, plenty of Republicans out there, Republican officials and Republican party operatives, just with the most disgusting and sexist smears which are, I know you guys are not unused to that sort of attack because you're prominent females in an era of social media, but it is absolutely time for the United States of America to stop that crap.
Yeah,
and the American people ignored it for their.
They did.
It looks like. I mean, at least in terms of the election results. But it is time for that to go.
And this is going to sound so, maybe you'll be surprised by this, but I just have been dying to say this. You know what I loved about 2020 and watching all these women run? You know what we didn't hear anything about? We didn't hear anything about what they were wearing. Nothing. It's all we heard about with Hillary Clinton. And it was nothing about it. It was about what they were saying and what they believed. And that is very refreshing.
Yeah, some people talked about her sneakers.
Her sneakers,
Well,
her sneakers are kind of a
that was kind of a thing that, frankly, she interjected.
Yeah.
It didn't define who
Right.
they were.
And I think she, I think she is in control of that part of her narrative. If she wants to wear interesting sneakers, she can, and it's fine. But I do think
Like Biden's aviators.
Right, it's like Biden's aviators. I mean, I do think, or Hillary Clinton's pantsuits to a certain extent. She was able to sort of take something that had been used against her and turn it into something that she defined for herself. But Jake, you're so right that in this country we have gotten so normalized to sexism just being a thing that we just have to internalize and accept, and that we accept that the electorate to some extent is going to hold women to a different standard, even holding black women to a different standard. We don't have to accept that. Other developed countries in the world have elected women leaders at the highest levels, and we are behind the curve. And I do think that we should acknowledge that this is one step in the right direction, but we have a long way to go on this.
And when Joe Biden makes his first address to Congress, generally when a president-elect speaks, it's not a State of the Union, it's an address, but it's the same imagery. You're going to see Joe Biden, and then you're going to have two women behind him for the first time in history. The Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, and the Vice President, Kamala Harris.
Yeah, and that's a step forward, but we do also need,
A woman.
at some point, a woman at that podium. And
You said it. I'm glad you made that
We'll get there
point.
at whatever the party, we'll get there at some point. Let's go back to Wilmington, Delaware, where Jeff Zeleny reports on the Biden campaign for us. Jeff, what's the latest?
Jake, we are getting word that the Joe Biden, president-elect of the United States, will be addressing the country tonight at 8 p.m. here from Wilmington in the on the stage that we've seen all week long. And it's going to be a celebration, I'm told, complete with fireworks and a light show and a drive-in rally that we have seen. So that will be tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern time here in Wilmington, I'm told. And it's unclear if we will see Mr. Biden before then. We do not expect to hear him speak before then. But we are getting word that he is fielding phone calls from friends, allies, and his soon-to-be new Vice President, Senator Kamala Harris. She tweeted out a video just a few moments ago that talks about, it shows her on the phone with him, and she said, "We did it, Joe. We did it, Joe. You're going to be the next president of the United States." So that is something that was a moment of history as well. And for the first campaign that I can recall coming on social media, on Twitter, sharing that, as we can see right there. In casual clothes, as Abby was saying earlier, Senator Harris was out with her husband for a morning walk, as they often do, and giving him that phone call there. And Jake, as we see cheering and signs of elation from Democrats at least, and maybe some independents across the country, we're also hearing those horns honking here in Wilmington, and a crowd is gathered here as well. A bit of history in Wilmington as well. Jake, it was 48 years ago today, this very day, November 7th, 1972, when Joseph Robinette Biden Jr. was elected to the Senate for the first time. He was not expected to win that race. It was an uphill battle. He won by some 3,000 votes or so. So 48 years ago today, of course, he is elected or named president-elect, projected that today. So a bit of history there as well. A few other things. I am told, again, his victory speech has been written for tonight. Of course, they've had several days to work on it. And we know what his message is. His message is clear about unifying the country, saying it's not a time for anger. But he also will give voice to the mandate that he does believe he has because of the popular vote and because of the, he will have received more votes than any other president in the history of the United States. So that is something that he will be leaning into as he gives that speech tonight. But Jake, otherwise, I have to say it is, a moment of jubilation here from Biden supporters. They have been expecting this, but when it which which was taken with much appreciation. Campaign manager Jen O'Malley, who is a rare woman campaign manager, I believe only the second woman to have a winning presidential campaign. At first, Kellyanne Conway was for President Trump 4 years ago. She was out for a run this morning when she heard the news. Her mother called her and said CNN has projected Joe Biden as the winner of the presidency. She was coming into the hotel, you can see behind me here. She said she was ecstatic over this, about running this winning campaign during a time of a pandemic when many questioned the Biden campaign's approach here to going all virtual. So that is just a bit of color here from Wilmington, Jake.
So the last two presidents have been elected with female campaign managers. Maybe something for politicians to think about. Kellyanne Conway and now Jen O'Malley Dillon. Now, there's a different story going on right now at the White House. Let's go to Jim Acosta, where President Trump is. I don't know if he's heard the news yet. Last I heard, he was out golfing, Jim.
Yeah, Jake, I can tell you, standing here in the White House grounds right now, we can hear the cheers coming from outside the White House grounds in all directions. And the president is not here right now to listen to those cheers. He's out on the golf course right now. You're looking at what we believe to be some live pictures of the Trump golf course out in Virginia. He's out there today. But I can tell you the president has reacted. People inside the campaign have reacted. And what we're hearing, first of all, the president is saying in a statement, we're not going to read it to you because it's full of false information, but the president is saying in a statement he's not going to accept the results of this election right now, that the legal challenges are going to proceed starting on Monday. But I've talked to sources inside and outside the campaign, and they say don't expect the president to accept the reality of this anytime soon. Don't expect him to concede this race. And just as we heard the president complain about fake news and fake polls while he was running for re-election, he's now complaining about fake election results, and he is in fact the one spreading fake news right now. But Jake, no further reaction from the president or the campaign at this point, but I can just tell you, standing here on the White House grounds, it's an extraordinary thing to listen to the cheers and the jubilation coming in from all directions. It's not just Black Lives Matter Plaza. It's coming from 17th Street on the west side of the White House grounds, 15th Street on the east side of the White House grounds. Jake, you know this territory very well. It is not often in the nation's capital when you hear these kinds of cheers just erupting from all sides of the White House. And it's an extraordinary thing. And obviously the cheers are not for the 45th president. They're for the 46th president. Jake.
All right, Jim Acosta at the White House, keeping an eye on things there, even while President Trump is out golfing. Thanks so much for that. It is kind of, I have to say, I mean, nobody knew when the call was going to happen, but we certainly have been leaning into the idea for a bit now that we were going to make this projection this morning. We thought the ballots were going to come in, and we wanted to be clear. It is, I don't know, symbolic that President Trump, who has golfed more than I think any president in modern American history as president, despite saying when Barack Obama did it that he would never do such a thing, that he's out golfing. He's certainly entitled to get some fresh air and exercise, as it were. But here's Atlanta. Oh, boy.
Electric slide.
That city's... It's going to be off the hook in Atlanta tonight.
So speaking of President Trump, I've been thinking about this, for the past 4 days as we've been getting to this point and as it's becoming more clear that Donald Trump would be defeated in this election. And what I was thinking about is that in my 20 years covering presidential campaigns, the moment that stands out the most to me, that I will remember forever, was being in Phoenix on November 5th, 2008, when John McCain gave his concession speech, which was the best political speech I'd ever heard. And the reason why it was so powerful is because he said, I urge all Americans who supported me to join me, not in just congratulating him, meaning President Obama, but offering our next president our goodwill and earnest effort to find ways to come together.
Yeah.
That was a remarkable moment. And it is not a moment I don't think any of us imagine that we will see. Let's hope. Hope springs eternal. But I don't think any of us is holding our breath, waiting for anything close to that, this was extraordinary, but it is more typical to hear. Even 4 years ago, Hillary Clinton gave a gracious concession speech.
Yeah, I'll say it again. In this country, the expectation is that what John McCain did that because he knew that would be written in the history books about him. So, your move, Donald Trump, about what you do. But I have to say, the president being on the golf course right now, I only imagine that this is sort of staff trying to give him a stress relief valve, right? You know, this is where he goes when they need him to be a little bit away from what's happening, a little bit away from what is playing out, literally right outside the White House. There are people in the streets outside of the White House that he would be able to hear if he were in that building.
Yep.
Now he is on a golf course, and it's because his staff probably want to facilitate the president being a little bit away from bad news. But at some point, he's going to have to confront this moment. This is where the rubber meets the road, I think, in the history books. Where do you, when you're president, it's how you act as president, but it's also what you do when your time is up. Going all the way back to George Washington. When your time is up, do you walk away gracefully or do you try to hang on to power? And now is President Trump's moment.
And that's just not how Donald Trump was brought up. He was brought up by a father who told him that you're either a fighter or you're a loser, and there's no one in between. And today he is a loser by definition. He is not going to go on for another term at the White House. One thing I will say is I've been communicating with some people who are familiar with discussions going on in and around him. We talked earlier about the process.
Yeah.
They think they have to get him through. And I was told that process is in motion. How long that process is going to take is the big question.
Look, it's not easy to lose a
it's
presidential
not.
election.
And
Talk
to
Mitt
lose the White
Romney
House.
or Hillary Clinton or John McCain would talk about it. He said after he lost, he said, I slept like a baby. I woke up every hour and cried. But not to be callous about it, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what he puts the country through, what he tries to put the country through, and whether or not his minions, his lawyers, start filing more frivolous lawsuits or whatever. It's over. The Trump era is over. Now maybe he'll remain as a force in Republican politics. We'll see. But his presidency is coming to a close. Anderson?
Jake, thanks very much. I want to talk with former governor of Ohio, John Kasich, who is joining us. Governor, you supported Joe Biden. Your thoughts on his victory, President-elect Biden?
Well, you know, Anderson, there's not been a Republican over the last 4 years that did more to say that Trump was not doing a good job. Remember, I didn't go to the convention, the Republican convention, and then I spoke at the Democrat convention, and I've been very vocal about this. But I want to be clear. Now is the time for Democrats, and I believe Joe Biden will do this, to begin to listen to what the other half of the country has had to say. I think that the other half of the country, in many respects, has felt as though they have not been listened to. They feel stuck economically, and it's going to be up to the Democrats to listen. Things like perhaps improving the earned income tax credit for working families, to think about what we can do to fix their schools, to think about what we can do to give them access to the internet. There's so many things that can be done to talk to that part of the country. And remember, this is broken down, sort of, Anderson, as an urban and country division. And it isn't good enough to just declare a great victory. And I'm very pleased that Biden's won. I put everything I had on the line well, not everything, but a lot of things on the line to do this. I'm pleased he's there. He needs to be a unifier, but we have to listen to what those folks, those Republicans, all across this country has had to say. And frankly, those Republicans have to understand what Democrats want to do, because if they want to improve health care, that doesn't mean they want Medicare for all. There is no socialism in Joe Biden. If all sides can begin to really listen and think, this country can be healed, in my opinion.
You know, both being a governor, but you know Washington well. Do you think that's possible? I mean, everybody always talks about healing, about coming together at election time, and obviously, you know, this day, the next day,
Anderson,
reality sets in.
The best thing that's happened to Joe Biden is the fact that the United States Senate is either going to be Republican or very close, and it will allow Joe Biden to do what he does best. It allows him to govern as a moderate. It allows him to do the things that I've always hoped he can do. And the far left can push him as hard as they want. And frankly, the Democrats have to make it clear to the far left that they almost cost him this election. that people in this country are basically center, center right, center left. They're not far left, and they're also not far right. And we got to hope that the far right will act responsibly now that this election is over. But do I think it's possible that you can get something done on climate? Yes. Is it going to be, some new Green Deal? Of course not. But there's reasonable things that can be done. What can be done with taxes? Okay, if you're going to focus on any sort of a tax cut, it ought to be for the middle and the lower income people in this country. Are there things that can be done with infrastructure? For sure, but making sure broadband's available to everyone. I think those things can happen. Are there going to be fights? But yeah, there's probably going to be fights, but you will have incremental steps. And I've always said that this election in 2020 was not a big vote on ideology. This is sort of getting back to normal. The big debate will come in 2024, but that's a long way off.
Yeah.
And today's the day that Biden's been declared as president.
Well, Governor Kasich, what was it about Joe Biden that made you felt he was the person for this moment?
Well, I've known him a long time, and just a couple years ago, he and I sat on a stage. He invited me to the University of Delaware, and we had a couple hour time together speaking publicly, and spent a lot of time privately. And one of my dear friends was John McCain, who was one of his best friends, and I know what the guy's all about. And he is, when I say a throwback, I don't mean old. I mean a return to the fact that we need to communicate, we need to be patient, we don't need to demonize our opponents, figure out a way to see the best in them. That's what I did throughout my entire career, and I resonate because I know that's what Joe has done. So I think actually he's in a better position today because being pulled from the left isn't going to work. They will not get those things done, and that Congresswoman from Virginia warned the Democrats. You want to talk about defunding the police, you'll have no support. And I think this is an opportunity for Biden to talk about the center right and the center left of this country and what can be achieved. Because we have enormous problems with debt, Social Security, Medicare, health care. Little steps, little steps.
This campaign was unlike, obviously, any we have seen before. The turnout was unlike any we have seen before as well. When did you worry that, the decisions that the Biden-Harris ticket made to keep him somewhat, to keep him off the trail, to not have large crowds gathering, to not be knocking on doors for months as the other campaign was doing? Did you worry that might make it impossible for him to get elected?
Well, I felt that age was a factor, and I know there are some people who voted for Donald Trump because they were worried about Biden's age. But what I was more concerned about, Anderson, was the fact that they did not come out early and talk about the violence in the cities. They waited too long on that. They did not, in clear terms, reject, really clear terms, the defunding of the police, and very clearly say, are you kidding me? I'm an American. I don't favor socialism. If there'd have been more strength in that, I think that perhaps he would have done better. But look, he's won, and it makes all the difference in the world when they put a W behind you, but he's probably learned from this. One other thing, one Democrat told me at some point, if they'd have been more clear in rejecting the hard left, they would have appealed more to Americans who I believe essentially live in the middle. That's where Americans are. And by the way, you can't take care of one group over another. If you're going to cut taxes for those at the top, you've got to make sure that those who are the hardworking people in the middle and the bottom, that they get relief. It has to be a balanced program where everybody feels as though they can be included, Anderson. That is what success is in politics. And forget the popularity and all the what party you belong to. Do what makes sense.
Governor Kasich, appreciate your time. Van, I heard you.
Thanks
saw
for
you
letting
sort
me
of
be on with you, Anderson.
I appreciate it as always. I heard you sort of agreeing with the governor when talking about reaching out to Republicans or listening to Republicans.
Look, I've spent the past 4 years, trying to find some kind of common ground. There's some stuff that's going to be battleground issues. You're talking about, immigrant rights and religious freedom for Muslims. Those are battleground issues, and we can't give an inch on that. But there's been some common ground issues, whether you're talking about addiction and the opioid crisis, whether you're talking about opportunity zones, anti-poverty, whether you're talking about criminal justice, where I felt there was more room for us to work together than people were recognizing. I think that the grace that frankly had not been shown the past 4 years, we need to start showing right now. We know what it feels like to feel like the president's not on your side and to want the president to send you some signals. There's a danger that we might start saying, well, don't send any signals to those guys, they were mean to us. I don't want us to become what we're fighting. I don't want us to feed what we're fighting. I believe that Joe Biden is correct. If we reset this conversation, there is common ground. You got people you got a bunch of older, white, heterosexual guys who are some of the best people in the country. They know a trade, they raised a family, they started a business. We need those guys to help rebuild this country. And they need to know that we respect them. They voted against us, that's fine. Vote against us again. But we need you. We need you to help us rebuild this country. You got kids in this country who need your example. If we start talking that way, I think we can get past some of these fears. And if we don't, we're going to be in another loop and another loop and another loop.
I'm just wondering, Glor, when you see these pictures, what do you think?
I think it's remarkable. I think that, again, it's like the steam has gone out of the teapot, and people are those people are relieved. I think the challenges are obvious. We've all been talking about the challenges. But one thing is that they believe that Joe Biden can change things, can change the way they feel and the way life is. And another thing I want to say, given all we've been talking about, will he be able to work with the Republicans? Will he be able to work with the liberals? The difference with Joe Biden is that when he tells you something, he is telling you the truth. And I know, Rick, that you know Biden. And he can talk a lot and get on people's nerves and all the rest, and you can talk about that. But he's a man who's devoted his life to public service, and he is a man who is known as somebody who told you the truth when he was dealing with you, and that matters.
Well, he calls himself a transitional president,
right.
and the question is, will it be a transition from an era of compromise and good faith compromise, or will it be a transition from that era to an era of zero-sum politics? I totally embrace what you said, Van, but what we have seen is a penchant to weaponize our differences rather than search for common ground. Yeah. And the political rewards have been there in the parties for that. You can't in a democracy ever get 100% of what you want. And the question is, are you willing to take 80? Or are you not going to take 80? And are you going to make the differences, exploit the differences for your own political profit? Or are you going to come together? And we'll see. That's certainly Biden believes that in the first.
It's also so, we've just come through a campaign where on the Democratic side, you did not see large gatherings of people.
Right.
Obviously, during the protests this summer, there were large gatherings of people in the streets. But to see these crowds this morning, the diversity of the crowds, a lot of mask wearing, which is certainly a good thing. Obviously, not social distancing, and over the last several days, there hasn't been, because we've had this election, but it bears repeating. We are in the midst of
this country's been a pressure cooker for the last 4 years. Donald Trump has had his hand on that dial.
Can I say something?
And this is a sense of relief there.
Totally.
And the great thing about it is, it's coming out in joy. And I use that word joy over and over again because that's like a word in the movement. The young people. There's Adrienne Marie Brown is this young kind of Instagram star who's been talking about this politics of joy. And these artists have been going out. Remember all those long lines? They're bringing the pizza. They're also bringing music. They're bringing dance, all these memes and stuff. They've created a basis of a positive culture. And so I think that that's good. And again, so you got to look for the good, look for the positive, look for the hopeful. These are hopeful. They're not out there mad. They're not out there. They're out there celebrating democracy. Let's build with those people. And people right now who are mourning, let's make sure they know they've got to play. If you want, come out to the party. Come out to the party. This is about America. It's not about versus Trump. It's about America. Come out to the party.
I'm sure Joe Biden loves seeing this, but it wouldn't surprise me if he also told everyone, you know what, celebrate apart rather than together right now because
of social distancing.
Because of the pandemic. Because of the pandemic. I think that, that has been his message, and these are people who clearly want to celebrate, and they are masked, I'm seeing, but, who knows? They're close together. But there is a celebration going on. Change sometimes brings that out in you. And I think, look, if Donald Trump has won, his supporters will probably be celebrating too. I'm not, I'm not saying that this belongs to one side or another, but
Yeah, there would be the same sense of relief inside his supporters and the same sense of,
more trucks.
possibilities.
There'd be more trucks because they have the trucks and the caravans, stuff like that. But look, I just think, so many people work so hard. Again, this particular, the way that the Biden campaign functioned really let a lot of people just kind of do their own thing. It wasn't a super top-down thing. You had Biden, there was a circle around him, moving him forward. But in a pandemic, you couldn't do it the normal way. So people just started creating their own stuff. There's a campaign called With Love that I was a part of. People just made their own ads.
Can I just
start
make
pushing forward.
one point on this? Jen O'Malley Dillon, the manager of this campaign, came in after the primary, could not meet with her staff, could not meet with her candidate, had to organize in the midst of a pandemic, take a campaign that was underfunded and underorganized, and turn it into a winning campaign, and did a remarkable job. First woman, I think, who's ever managed a winning presidential race. Did a remarkable job in transforming this campaign under the most difficult circumstances any manager has ever faced.
Conway.
And that's right, Kellyanne Conway. My apologies. But, this task was just so prodigious. And it needs to be said, what she and the entire team did to take the campaign from where it was in the primary to where it is today, a winning campaign.
And you can't,
remarkable
accomplishment. And you can't forget too. In the primary, he was going down. As I said, he went from being a joke to a juggernaut. So you got to give some credit to Clyburn.
A lot of credit.
Stood up and Clyburn said, "Hey guys,
some credit."
Some credit.
Even Santorum's going to give credit.
All credit.
But I'm just saying.
I'm taking Jim out to lunch. I need everybody sees Jim Clyburn.
But Jim Clyburn reached out and said, "Look, this is our guy. Let's get around this guy." But that meant that from the very beginning, the campaign was a little bit different than a normal winning primary campaign, and it brought that spirit of ordinary people in.
And they stayed on message. They didn't sort of, go after every bright, shiny object, go after every tweet. They just kind of stayed on their message. They talked about COVID. They talked about health care, even when it came to the Supreme Court and the Supreme Court nominee. They stuck to what they knew.
Message discipline from Joe Biden.
Cared about. Message discipline from Joe Biden. Think about that.
Yeah, we should also talk about, this is probably impolitic to say, but the fact is there are a lot of people who were nervous. I wrote about what the campaign needed to be doing during the pandemic, because if the president had seized the platform and led the country through this pandemic in a way that broadened his base, that could be a problem. But what really happened was Biden was relatively quiet for many months, and the president had the stage to himself. That turned out to be a plus for Biden.
Let's go back to Jake in D.C. Jake?
All right, Anderson, the congratulations are starting to come from not just prominent Democrats, but prominent Republicans. We heard from former Ohio Governor John Kasich, obviously, a few minutes ago on our air. Jeb Bush, the former governor of Florida and who ran for president and lost in the primaries to Donald Trump, writes, "Congratulations to President-elect Biden. I have prayed for our president most of my adult life. I will be praying for you and your success. Now is the time to heal deep wounds. Many are counting on you to lead the way." A lovely statement from Jeb Bush. It would be nice if we heard similar from current Republican office holders, not just former, but it is a nice thing to hear.
Yeah, I don't know if you caught this as you read it. The second line, "I've prayed for our president most of my adult life."
Well, I'm sure he prayed. I'm sure he prayed for
adult life.
I'm sure he prayed for Donald Trump as well.
Yeah.
There was no love lost there.
Yeah, exactly,
I'm sure he wanted him to succeed.
And listen. Obviously, the goal of this tweet was to lead by example and to show what class looks like, which is, frankly, how the Bushes have historically seen this. His father, George H.W. Bush, was the last one-term president. There is no love lost, but that is somebody who is trying to kind of, shout from the rooftops, "Please follow." I'm interested to see when and if his brother, the former president, does something similar.
Will.
Yeah, he will.
I'm curious about when.
Yeah, and I think a lot of Republicans, let's be honest, probably feel exactly the same way as Jeb Bush does. I don't agree with all of Joe Biden's policies, but I think Bush is saying here in this tweet, I think you can do the job. And, and frankly, I'm okay with you doing the job. And I wouldn't be surprised if there were many sitting Republicans in the United States Senate who are looking at the situation and they're saying, the chances of us holding on to the Senate are pretty good. They like that. They like having control, the reins of the pace of the judiciary. They like having a brake valve for the Congress in general. And they're okay with a president who is less erratic, who has given them a lot of heartburn over the last 4 years, if you're being honest. President Trump has not made the life of some Republican senators in particularly easy. And a Joe Biden presidency, though they disagree, would be seen, even, I think, in Congress as a relief for some people.
Not being chased after in the hallways about every tweet that the leader of their party
That they
puts
had
out
not
there is
seen
going
because they
to be a
don't
relief.
tweet.
Not to say that he's not going to be tweeting. He is going to be tweeting. He's just not going to be
They don't
tweeting
have
as
to
the
respond
president.
to it
As the
anymore.
president,
Yeah, they don't have to lie to reporters anymore and say they haven't seen the tweet. They can just oppose Joe Biden's policies or try to work with him. Let's go outside the White House. President Trump, as far as we know, is still golfing. But outside the White House, there is quite a crowd of celebrants. Vivian Salama is in the crowd covering this for us. Vivian, tell us what you're seeing.
Hey, Jake, that's right. Outside the White House, we're about 100 feet outside the north side of the White House right now. And within seconds of CNN and other news organizations calling the race for Biden, the crowd started flowing into this area of downtown D.C. Now, for folks who are not familiar with D.C., I want to sort of paint the picture. I'm standing at the corner of H Street and 16th Street in Northwest, which was renamed Black Lives Matters Plaza. And so right behind me, you see crowds now gathering all the way down Black Lives Matters Plaza, chanting and cheering for Joe Biden. And that celebration has continued as we've been here. Folks cheering when the race was called, when some news organizations called the state of Nevada for Biden, then the chant started again. You have groups of gay rights, LGBTQ protesters and demonstrators, activists who are out here celebrating their victories. Trans people have been out here celebrating. You have a lot of women with veils, Muslims, who are coming out here as a group to celebrate this victory for Joe Biden and what it means for them sort of in this transition. Some interesting chants as well. We heard the crowd a few moments ago chanting for Stacey Abrams, celebrating the role that she has played in Georgia to help get Democrats in the forefront of this race and potentially flip that state. And so this crowd is growing by the second. And you can see, it's hard for us to see where we're standing, but we can't even see the end of it. On Black Lives Matters Plaza, the crowd stretches all the way down, and they continue to go, Jake. So I think we're going to see a lot more celebrations in the hours ahead.
That's right. A lot of celebrations in a spot where not long ago protesters were being gassed so that President Trump could walk to the church there. Vivian, why don't you walk around the crowd there a little bit if you can? Let us see a little bit more.
We're going to try, Jake. Our signal is very fragile. We'll try to walk around and take you through. Our signal is very fragile right now, but we're going to try to walk around and hopefully we don't lose you. But here we go. If we can take a little walk here, you can see some of these signs around here. A lot of signs about "you're fired," echoing President Trump's signature from his popular reality show. Hopefully you can see me every single time a new group comes through.
All right.
Jake.
We're losing this. We're losing the signal. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Probably a lot of satellite action going on there right now.
A lot of people down there.
A lot of people down there. A lot of cell phones. I want to read some of the more some of the celebratory and congratulatory notes that are coming in. Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, and a close ally of President Trump, somebody kind of in the mold of President Trump. This is going to sting for President Trump. Sending a note saying congratulations to Joe Biden on his election as President of the United States and to Kamala Harris on her historic achievement. The U.S. is our most important ally, and I look forward to working closely together on our shared priorities from climate change to trade and security. That's going to leave a mark.
Yep.
And then former President Bill Clinton, less of a surprise. America has spoken, democracy has won. Now we have a president-elect and vice president-elect who will serve all of us and bring us all together. congratulations to Joe Biden and Kamala Harris on your momentous victory.
And Jake, just in the last couple of days, our colleague Christina Alessi has been doing some reporting about what's going on in the business world and how they're looking at this period that could be actually quite unstable for the United States, in which you have a president-elect and a sitting president who may not concede, and they've made it very clear they're going to try to inch towards stability as much as possible, even to the point potentially of weighing in to say respect the results of the election.
So there's a new statement from Barack Obama, the 44th president of the United States and the former boss of now President-elect Joe Biden, saying, "I could not be prouder to congratulate our next president, Joe Biden, and our next First Lady, Jill Biden. I also couldn't be prouder to congratulate Kamala Harris and Doug Emhoff for Kamala's groundbreaking election as our next vice president. In this election, under circumstances never experienced, Americans turned out in numbers never seen." That's really such a good point. We're in the middle of a pandemic, and it was such a great turnout. "And once every vote is counted, President-elect Biden and Vice President-elect Harris will have won a historic and decisive victory. We're fortunate that Joe's got what it takes to be president and already carries himself that way. Because when he walks into the White House in January, he'll face a series of extraordinary challenges no incoming president ever has: a raging pandemic, an unequal economy and justice system, a democracy at risk, and a climate in peril. I know he'll do the job with the best interests of every American at heart, whether or not he had their vote. So I encourage every American to give him a chance and lend him your support. The election results at every level show that the country remains deeply and bitterly divided. It will be up to not just Joe and Kamala, but each of us to do our part to reach out beyond our comfort zone, to listen to others, to lower the temperature, and find some common ground from which to move forward. All of us remembering that we are one nation under God. Finally, I want to thank everyone who worked, organized, and volunteered for the Biden campaign, every American who got involved in their own way, and everybody who voted for the first time. Your efforts made a difference. Enjoy this moment, then stay engaged. I know it can be exhausting, but for this democracy to endure, it requires our active citizenship and sustained focus on the issues, not just in an election season, but all the days in between. Our democracy needs all of us more than ever, and Michelle and I look forward to supporting our next president and first lady however we can." A lovely and typical and characteristically expansive remarks from President Obama.
But that coming from a president who inherited the worst economic recession since the Great Depression says a lot.
Yeah.
And it's true. We've never had a pandemic like this in 100 years, and the economic fallout has been as significant. So he understands what that really is like, and it's worse now because I don't know that our country was as divided in 2008 as it is now politically.
It didn't feel it because we had just elected the nation's first black president.
Yeah.
It felt like the nation had come together in a lot of ways.
I felt it a couple years later in 2010 when everything changed. I just also want to take a moment to talk about the effort that President Obama put in to getting his vice president elected to the presidency. He did it 4 years ago for Hillary Clinton. In fact, he said, "This is personal for me," to people in the crowds, and it didn't work. This time it did. A lot of reasons for that. But in terms of President Obama, starting with the Democratic convention, he broke all protocols because he thought that President Trump broke all norms in a dangerous way. And when I say broke protocols, he was so aggressive against President Trump, and he continued that on the stump in recent weeks.
Yeah. I mean, imagine if George W. Bush in 2012 had gone out on the stump. He didn't, and that's normally what presidents do is refrain. Barack Obama did not choose to do that.
Yeah, no, he didn't, and he had no choice. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, he was as much a part of this campaign as Joe Biden was, because Donald Trump's presidency began about Barack Obama and who he was, and Donald Trump's presidency was in large part about the invalidation of the Obama era. And so this was not just about electing Joe Biden, but about preserving or restoring some of the things that he did as president that had been lost in a Donald Trump presidency. But I do want to make refer to one thing that he talked about in his statement, which is the turnout in this election. Not as a political statement, but just as a statement of fact that when you let Americans vote, when you give them ways to vote, they will vote, and they do vote. And Republicans for many years have taken the opposite stance, trying to make it more difficult for people to vote for a number of reasons. They say it's because of fraud. But I think when you really talk to them privately, they acknowledge it's because they're concerned that there are not enough people who support their views who show up at the polls, and that it is a political strategy about raw power. But I do think that if there's one thing Donald Trump proved in this election, you can turn out Republicans too, if you give them a chance to vote. And so it's time that we as a country just do this fair and square. Let as many people vote as we can, make it easier for people to vote, and they'll show up, even Republicans.
By the way, millions of people voted by mail for Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Millions of people voted by mail for Republicans. And as far as we can tell by the exit polls as they stand right now, Donald Trump appears to have increased the black support and Latino support for him from previous Republican presidential candidates, Dana.
Thanks, Jake. And I want to bring in the House Majority Whip, Congressman Jim Clyburn of South Carolina. Mr. Whip, you endorsed Joe Biden in the South Carolina primary. You gave him life in that process, and now he is the president-elect. Your reaction?
Well, I'm very pleased with the results. I'm very ecstatic about what may be the future of this great country of ours. My investment in Joe Biden had everything to do with the restoration of our pursuit towards a more perfect union. I know this is not a perfect country. My God, I'm here. I'm living testimony that the country is not perfect. But we cannot give up on the country. And I could not sit idly by and watch this country take backward steps in that pursuit of perfection. And so I am pleased that we can now get back on course. We need to restore voting rights to people. We need to restore people's lives and livelihoods. This campaign and a few other things before demonstrated that Alexis de Tocqueville's admonition that this country is great, not because it is more enlightened than any other nation, but rather because it has always been able to restore or to repair its faults. Some fault lines have opened up in education, in healthcare. Even the election 4 years ago opened up a fault line. And this was an opportunity for us to repair that. And so that's what I'm happy about.
You tweeted about Kamala Harris being the vice president-elect and the first woman of color to do that, and about what this means for diversity. Can you talk about the emotions that you feel right now?
I'll tell you, I don't admit it, but that way, when she was named to the ticket, I'm the father of 3 daughters, and I have 2 granddaughters. And to me, this breaks a glass ceiling for them and all other daughters and granddaughters in the world. So I was very, very moved by this. Now, Joe and I talked about it several times when he was trying to make his decision. He had agreed it would be a woman. And I don't mind saying now, I said to him in private that I thought that a lot of the results would turn on whether or not that woman be a black woman. I never said that publicly because I don't think you ought to diminish your candidate. And when you ever tell a candidate what he must do in publicly, that diminishes the standing with the public. So I gave all my advice to him in private, but I'm very pleased that it was a black woman selected. I think it cemented his relationship to the black community. And if I may, let me say this about these recent polls about about Donald Trump increasing his vote in the black community, especially black men. Now, I think I know how to gauge that stuff. Not just with the barbershops. I have a way of living that keeps me in close contact with the black community. And let me tell you something. When you poll, these were exit polls that came to that conclusion. The exit polls will not give you what was going on this year, because more than 80% of African Americans in a lot of communities voted before Election Day.
Well,
if you get your information from the exit polls on Election Day, you do not have an accurate universe.
But Mr. Clyburn, just
so that dead wrong.
Okay, just so you know, and we can talk about this later, it's probably not the moment, but the exit polls done were not just Election Day. It was prior to Election Day when early voting started. But let's put that aside right now, because I want to follow up on something that you just said. You revealed for the first time that you urged now President-elect Joe Biden to pick a woman of color. I tried to get you to say that at the time, and many others did. You didn't bite. What was his reaction, aside from the obvious, which is that he acted on it? But in the immediate moments after you made that suggestion, what was his reaction?
Well, he listened. He did not respond to me publicly, and of course, or even privately. Of course, about 2 or 3 days before he made the announcement, he was still torn, and we concluded. I think he said to me, "My heart's in one direction, my head's in the other." I said, "Go somewhere in private and see can you bring both of them together."
Which one was his heart and which one was his head, do you think?
I'm never going to tell that one.
But you think you know the answer?
I do know the answer. Yeah, I know what he said to me.
Can you give us anything more about those conversations?
No,
Okay.
we can talk them to me.
Well, let's
I'm never going to.
Okay, let's look ahead. Well, first of all, let me just ask, have you spoken to President-elect Biden since the news today?
No, I've not spoken with him today. Quite frankly, I was going about my ordinary business. I was real nervous I was never nervous about Pennsylvania. But because of all the litigation, I wanted to see us do this with not having to need Pennsylvania. And I think we still may be there. But I was more nervous about Arizona than any other place. I don't know what the results have been.
You know how hard it's going to be because you've been in Congress for so long with either party, both parties in charge of either chamber. What is your best piece of advice for Joe Biden as he not only tries to reach across the aisle, but tries to navigate your caucus, where, as you know, based on the call that you had with House Democrats this week, there are a lot of progressives who want their voices heard, but a lot of people who represent moderate districts who want the leadership of the Democratic Party to listen to them as well.
Look, we've got a big tent, and we need to be respectful of each other. I understand all of us have got congressional districts that are different from the other congressional districts. I know a lot of people in the United States Congress that get elected overwhelmingly in their districts that cannot get elected in my district. And there are a lot of districts that I cannot get elected in. And that's what we have to keep in mind, that these congressional districts are different, and therefore people's pursuit of their political reactions and their votes, they're all going to be different. And if you learn anything about being a member of Congress, be in charge of the vote counting and see what you have to do in order to reconcile people's backgrounds and experiences to get the votes. And so I'm so tired of all of this progressive versus moderate. Let me tell you something if you got time. My father was a very conservative guy. He used to drill in our heads that if you make $1, son, save a nickel. If you leave the room, turn the lights out, conserve energy. But he was a minister. I never heard him ask his congregations for a conservative offering. He always asked for a liberal offering. So I learned early that conservatism is good in some instances, liberalism is good in other instances. Let's see, can we reconcile those things? This whole notion that I got to be your way or the highway, you better stop that. Our party is not made up of that kind of people. You know, we got, what, 55 African Americans in our caucus? And over on the Republican side, they've got one. And he's now gone. I don't know if they elected another one. So we don't have the same makeup of the caucus. And we've got to stop all this foolishness of it's got to be my way. We got to put this in the bill or I'm not going to vote for it. Come on. That just cannot be our future. If so, we're going to be back in the minority and we're going to be stuck in that minority for a long time. Let's respect each other's backgrounds, each other's congressional districts, and give people enough room to represent their districts.
Mr. Clyburn, the House Majority Whip, again, the man who endorsed Joe Biden in the South Carolina Democratic primary at a time where he needed that endorsement and gave him political life and ultimately the nomination and the presidency. Thank you so much, and congratulations to you, sir.
Thank you. Well, thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Without
what do you think of that?
Without Majority Whip Clyburn, today would not be happening.
Exactly.
Period. I mean, maybe a different Democrat would have won the nomination and gone on to win, or who knows. But Clyburn is responsible for the Biden presidency.
And for the folks,
period.
And for the folks at home, he's also the guy who counts the votes in the House of Representatives. So he knows what he's talking about, and he's someone who now has an. I mean, I shouldn't say now. He is a well-respected Democrat and has been for a very long time. But he's in a position where his word and his voice about how Joe Biden navigates the next 4 years as president, navigates the Democratic caucus and the relationship with Republicans is going to carry a lot of weight. And it really matters, I think, Dana, what he said to you at the very end, which is that he wants the party to recognize that it is a coalition party that is made out of liberals and more conservative Democrats. And we should be clear, Jim Clyburn is a congressman from South Carolina. He represents a lot of black voters who are, many of them, more politically conservative than people think. So it is a party that is going to be an amalgamation of a lot of different views. And Joe Biden, it's not going to be easy for him to navigate that, but he's going to have to both deal with his own party and what we were discussing earlier, reach out to Republicans and figure that all out.
But he was warning the progressives in the party kind of on behalf of Joe Biden to, you know, not just go for everything, but understand that progress sometimes takes baby steps and sometimes takes compromise.
Yeah, look, and this is something that we haven't covered much this week because we've been more focused on who the president is going to be. But there is a lot of there's a civil war going on within the House Democratic Party right now. The House Democrats lost a lot of seats during this election, even though Joe Biden won. There are a lot of more moderate Democrats. There are a lot of more. Well, they lost 4 seats, but they thought they were going to pick up.
They were going to gain.
I should have said they lost a lot of races. They thought they were going to gain about 10 or 15 seats, and they ended up losing 4. A lot of moderate Democrats that were very disappointed. And one of the reasons they were disappointed, and we heard this in the conference call that House Democrats had that was leaking in real time and being reported on by our colleague Manu Raju and others, is there were people like the Congresswoman from Virginia and others from more moderate districts complaining that AOC and Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib and other members of the so-called squad and others progressives who have done a tremendous amount to bring enthusiasm and ideas to the Democratic Party, but that some of their ideas, especially defunding the police, and that notion hurt Democrats, hurt them in races where the Republicans were able to tie the Democrats to socialism, to the idea of defunding the police. And that was a little speech He wasn't talking to you.
No, he was
He
definitely
was
not
talking to
talking to me.
Congresswoman Ilhan Omar
Yeah.
and AOC and Rashida Tlaib and others.
Which he said privately on
Yes.
that phone call this week. And the fact that he took the chance that we gave him to say it publicly, I thought was very, very telling.
But he's also been saying this for quite some
Sure,
time.
of
I
course.
remember this summer during the George Floyd protests, he was very clear. Defund the police is not a message that Democrats should adopt or that would work for many Democrats across the country. He was crystal clear about that. And this is a man who was himself involved in the civil rights movement back in the 1960s. So he's not just saying that because he's been looking from his ivory tower in Washington. I also think that when Joe Biden said yesterday, when he came out and spoke, that we have a mandate, we were talking about it in the context of a mandate to lead the entire country. But I also think that he has a mandate to lead the Democratic Party specifically in a particular direction. He had to navigate a lot of minefields in this general election, including this issue of defund the police, including some of these other tricky issues where he had to be somewhere between not alienating the left and not being seen as overly central or not alienating, the suburban part of the country that he was trying to win back. And he did that.
He achieved
and
it.
so that path that he carved out in the general election, they're going to have to figure out a way to turn that into a governing principle that can help him navigate these minefields that he'll face immediately.
He did a
upon
skillful
becoming
job of
president.
threading the needle, of not alienating the progressives, whereas where the energy is in the party, and not alienating the suburbs of Philadelphia, where he needed the votes.
Yeah, and where he got
the votes. He did an able job of threading the needle. I will also say that if he had been running against a less ham-handed opponent, I mean, Donald Trump would go out there and say Cory Booker is going to invade your neighbor. I mean, like it wasn't. They weren't even dog whistles. It was bullhorn racist tropes, and like making Cory Booker, Senator Booker,
Jake,
the poster child of it. Cory Booker's not exactly Willie Horton.
But President Trump, President Trump got his people out.
Sure.
Okay.
Yep.
But he didn't win over the suburban
He
ones.
did not win over the
That's
suburban.
what I'm
But his theory of this election was that if Trump has his own people, and if he brings enough of them out, he can win. He got somewhat close, but obviously it was not enough. I do think that there is a choice facing Republicans now about what you're saying, which is, is that message a ham-handed message, or is it the best we've got?
Yeah.
I don't know that they fully settled on what the answer to that is.
I think if you give truth serum to Republican elected leaders, most of them, they will say it's not the best they've got. that it's maybe the opposite of the best they've got on that. One thing I want to say, just going back to the whole the comments that Mr. Clyburn just made about progressives and moderates and how he doesn't like those terms and everyone has to just figure out how to deal together. We know how hard that is going to be.
I don't like those terms.
we know how hard it's going to be.
Come on.
I mean, listen. I mean, you allow him to say what he wants. He does want to try to figure out a way to lead
I don't like
the entire
those terms.
party. But what I want to say is that I got a text earlier today, I believe it was, from a very progressive member of Congress who was reminding me, as we were talking about black voters and how black voters came out, but also progressive young voters, people of color in urban centers, that was when we dissect these votes after this election is over and we can have time to do that the increase in the voter share for Joe Biden, this member of Congress believes, is going to show that really helped push him into the presidency, and that those voters and the leaders of those voters, progressive lawmakers, are going to have high expectations that their voices be heard. And that's understandable.
Yeah. I mean, and it is true that Joe Biden could not have won the presidency without progressive Democrats who see themselves in the AOCs and the Ilhan Omars of the world.
Yep.
And I know that Jim Clyburn also knows that is true too. But there has to be a negotiation here. I think what those young voters said in this election by coming out for someone who is their polar opposite in a lot of ways, an older, white standard bearer of the old guard, is that they are willing to engage in the political process because it's affected their lives. And so I think on some level there's maybe a silver lining here, which is that if young people came out for Joe Biden, it's because they believe that they know that there is going to have to be some kind of compromise. It's not because Joe Biden said to them, I'm going to be, the far left leader that you've always wanted. I'm going to be contrary to what the president said, he is not going to be a Bernie Sanders light. That is just not who Joe Biden has been for his political life.
And let me just also say, first of all, the progressives did a ton to win this presidency, as you're saying, for Joe Biden. First of all, Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, was door knocking.
Yep.
Her seat was safe. She was door knocking to get people
after a tough primary, I should say.
After a tough primary, her seat was safe. She was door knocking to get people to vote in Minnesota, to get progressives to get her people to the polls to vote for Joe Biden, so that Minnesota would not be in play as people thought it would be several months ago. AOC is one of the stars of the Democratic Party, period. And when I had her on State of the Union before the election, she was more disciplined and able than almost any politician I'd interviewed in the previous few months.
Important interview.
In terms of her acknowledgement of where she disagreed with Joe Biden on issues like the Green New Deal, et cetera, and also the fact that Joe Biden was, in her view, the absolute only choice.
Yeah.
I don't want to.
She said she wanted the privilege of having to worry about.
Yes, exactly.
To lobby him is what she
the privilege to lobby him.
So nobody should. Oh, look at this huge turnout in Washington D.C. outside the White House. Just people celebrating Joe Biden's victory. A lot of relieved people, a lot of happy people. A lot of anti-Trump people, a lot of pro-Biden people. Biden-Harris count the votes, you see.
And luckily, a lot of masks.
And a lot of masks. We're seeing a lot of masks, which is good, although the crowds, according to public health officials, not so good. But
correct.
The masks are good. In any case, what I was going to say is nobody should treat the progressives as if they're a pain, because they are a vital part of the Democratic coalition, period.
Correct.
But that said, there is a reckoning going on, because some of the things that were said, especially when it comes to defunding the police, there are more moderate Democrats that think that it made their coalition, their majority, smaller. And look, this is Minneapolis. They are social distancing while celebrating in Minneapolis, Minnesota. So that's what's going to happen. There's going to be some fighting about this stuff in the Democratic caucus, we heard some warning shots from Congressman Clyburn just then.
And just on what you were talking about Ilhan Omar, even though she didn't have a real race, that she was knocking on doors. Pramila Jayapal, the co-chair of the Progressive Caucus. She represents Washington. She didn't have a real race, and yet she is part of an organization. She has an organization where they go out and they train people to knock on doors in battleground states all over. That is a very, very vital part of the progressive movement that we were just talking about, that allowed this moment to happen, that fueled this moment.
So Senator Mitt Romney, who ran for president and lost to Barack Obama and Joe Biden in 2012, just tweeted, "Ann and I extend our congratulations to President-elect Joe Biden and Vice President-elect Kamala Harris. We know both of them as people of goodwill and admirable character. We pray that God may bless them in the days and years ahead." Let's bring in Susan Rice, who was the National Security Advisor didn't mean to surprise you there, Dr. Rice. First of all, get your reaction. You worked with Joe Biden in the Obama-Biden administration. You have been campaigning for him, endorsing him, doing everything you could to get him elected. Your reaction to this moment?
I'm joyous. I'm grateful to the American people. I'm thanking God, and I'm grateful to Joe Biden and Kamala Harris for being who they are. They are exactly what our country needs now. We need competence. We need decency. We need honesty. And we need to come together. And that's what they represent. I know this is a painful moment for many who wish for a different outcome. I'm living in a household with some of them. But at this moment, I believe that we have an extraordinary opportunity to move this country forward, to reclaim our leadership in the world, and to address so many of the fundamental challenges we face, from COVID to the economy, to education, to healthcare, to racial justice, and climate change. And this is the moment we have to do so, and we have to heal in the process.
I want to ask you about your son is a somewhat notable conservative figure in the country, and I want to ask you about his disappointment in a second. But I do also want to first ask you, if you don't mind, as a black woman, we now have a black woman vice president-elect. It has never happened in the history of this country, and I'm just wondering if you could. I know you prefer to talk policy and you prefer to talk politics, but and national security. But I'm just wondering if you'll indulge me and our viewers, as a black woman, what does this moment mean to you?
It's amazing. It's amazing. It brings tears to my eyes and joy to my heart. And my, almost 18-year-old daughter that feels thrilled. I know there are young girls, and I hope young boys all over this country who see themselves in her and the opportunity for them to be who they want to be. I could not be more proud of Kamala Harris and all that she represents for all of us. This is it's a historic, groundbreaking moment.
It's obviously a very emotional moment for tens of millions of Americans, especially those who before today had never seen someone like them, a woman of color, represented in a president or vice president. And we should acknowledge that this is a moment of great joy and celebration. As for the
celebration.
Yeah, in terms of the experiment of America and the promise of America, what can happen here. Joe Biden is expected to give his first speech this evening as president-elect. You're someone in a household where I know you a little bit, and I know your family a little bit, and there are Trump supporters in your family and Biden supporters in your family. What does Joe Biden need to say to start unifying the country?
Well, I must say, not just for my son, but others in my family and universe who have different political views. I'm really proud of my son today. He's an American first, like I am. He believes in this country, and he also wants to see us move forward in unity, as disappointed as he may be. And we are family first, and always will be. And this is a moment where we all need to look to the future and heal. And I believe that's what he believes as well. So we're together today. We're one household, and we're one country. And we got to remember that just as in a family, in a country, we have so much more in common than that which divides us. And we've got to find that fundamental truth together as to who we are and what we can be. We can't survive divided. We can only be strong and safe and prosperous if we come together. And this is a moment where, on a very personal level and on a national level, even on a global level, we have to recognize and embrace that reality.
The space for celebration, there is some risk to it because President Trump has not conceded, and obviously we want to give him time to process the information coming his way, fast and furious. But he's also out there claiming once again that he actually won the election. He's making all sorts of false allegations about massive voter fraud. There's no evidence of that anywhere. How should how should President-elect Joe Biden deal with this? And do you have concerns about whether or not there will be a peaceful transition of power?
I think it's hard not to have some degree of concern, but I believe that this country is strong and resilient and that our institutions have shown up for this moment. Jake, if you'd asked me a week ago, 2 weeks ago, would our state and local officials, would our courts, would our people continue to have patience and faith in our process? How confident of that was I? I was confident, but I wasn't super confident. And today we can look at all of those and say, my goodness. And I have to say the media too. The media played this responsibly. And so all of our institutions have held. Now, Donald Trump has a choice to make. He can stand up and be part of our democracy, our historic tradition. He can be a responsible leader to hand off power. I know there are many reasons to doubt that, and I can't say I'm particularly optimistic, but the best thing he could do for himself, for his party, and for our country is to act like a president of the United States now at this late stage. So I hope he will. But if he doesn't, quite frankly, the nation, the institutions, the world, we're moving on. There will be a transition. Joe Biden will be the next president of the United States come January 20th. And he and Kamala Harris will be prepared to lead a team to govern this country again with competence and integrity. So it is going to be okay. It may be, a rough next couple of months if Donald Trump chooses to make it that way. That would be unfortunate for his legacy. It'd be unfortunate for the country. But we will get through this. And when we come out the other end, it will be a better day, and a day when finally government is turned to serve the American people and our many, many needs, rather than anybody's personal interests.
Dr. Rice, you were on the short list. Joe Biden was considering asking you to serve as his vice president. Obviously, I'm sure you would be honored to play any role in the Biden-Harris administration. People have talked about you as a potential Secretary of State. Have you had any discussions with anyone on the transition team about a possible role in the administration? Would you be open to it?
Jake, I'm not going to get into that. This is not about me. This is about the United States of America. It's a day for celebration. This is a day to lift up Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. I will, as I've always said, I will serve in whatever capacity or not that Joe Biden thinks is best. But that's not the point. The point is today we're turning the page. We're opening a new chapter. I can't tell you how many messages I've gotten from people around the world, literally from Nigeria to London to Nairobi to Ottawa, just joy. And their message is, my God, thank God, America is back. You are back to being able to be the shining city on a hill that we can look to. And literally, that's the message I've been getting. So let's celebrate that. And then let's figure out in the days to come, it will be Joe Biden's decision how he wants to constitute his team. And I'm happy to serve my country and to serve him in any way I can.
All right, Dr. Rice, thanks so much for taking the time to talk to us today. We really appreciate it. Best to every member of your family on this day. Really.
Thank you, Jake. Good to talk to you.
Fascinating, and it's her son Jake is a noted conservative on the campus of Stanford. Was in the news quite a bit for that, and it was. I liked hearing about the family disagreements. My family is Trump supporters and Biden supporters, and this is not an easy day for the Jakes of the world. Speaking of Dr. Rice's son, Jake, and
the other Jake.
It's. I mean, there are, as we've discussed, there are close to 70 million Americans who wanted a different outcome.
A lot of families are in that position, and I do think that for those who are open to being reached out to, they will have that outreach. I think that Joe Biden has made it very clear that he plans to try at least to bring everyone in. I think back to when President Trump was elected, and he said that he would do that, and then he didn't.
No, he never did.
He never did. So it's more than words. It's going to be actions. We'll see what comes, but I do think that there is more of a history for Joe Biden in his actual life of doing that. I also thought it was notable, as Susan Rice said, that the world is watching. You know, I have friends in London, in Beijing, who are literally glued to their televisions watching to see what is happening here in the United States, because the United States is obviously supposed to be the leader of the free world. And there have been a lot of questions about whether that is still true, and what American leadership means for the rest of the world, and what it might mean for the rest of the world under a Joe Biden presidency or another 4 years of Donald Trump. And I think that you're going to see, in more than just Boris Johnson speaking up and basically saying, we think this is a done deal, you're going to see a lot more of that, I suspect, from other world leaders who have to decide which tack they're going to take.
Yeah.
In some ways, it might actually be messier for them to engage in this idea that the election has been undecided when all evidence to the contrary says that it in fact
Yeah, the world is watching. She also said the world is moving on, which was a very telling moment, especially given the fact that the president's ally across the pond, Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister of the UK, was one of the first to publicly congratulate Joe Biden before the president conceded. Meanwhile, let's look at what the next First Lady just tweeted out. She tweeted a photo of her and the president-elect holding a sign saying "Doctor," and it was Vice President Biden live here, and she's covering up the vice there, saying he will be a president for all of our families. I mean, that's a message with not a lot of words, but a lot of impact and import.
And America's going to get really familiar with Philadelphia accents. If you weren't sick of mine enough, wait till you hear the soon-to-be First Lady of the United States and her Willow Grove inflect. It's going to be interesting. She's a really kind woman, and I got to interview her. You've interviewed her. She has made military families her cause, and that will continue to be her cause. She did that when she was the Second Lady of the United States. She said that she will do that as the First Lady of the United States as well, working with military families, having been a military family because of her son, Beau, and other members of her family.
And there's something else that's going to be really fascinating about Jill Biden. When she was Second Lady, you both remember, she's a teacher, and she continued to teach, a professor. She continued to do so while she was Second Lady. She said, I think when it was my interview with her, that she would do that when she's First Lady, too. She would continue to work. And
Dr. B.
Don't think that has happened before. Somebody can correct me if I'm wrong. Obviously, first ladies have a lot to do in their official role, but to work outside that home is not something we've seen before, I believe.
Yeah. And it was a statement when she did it as Second Lady. Yeah. It'll be a huge statement if she follows through and does it again. And but there are some ways that you can kind of dovetail both roles, right? And I believe that when she was Second Lady, the community college pathway was a big part of the kind of Obama-Biden economic message, and I suspect you'll see a lot of that again, especially as they try to get their hands around not just the coronavirus, but also the economic situation in this country going forward.
Dr. Biden's aide just texted me, it has not happened before. There has never been a First Lady who has kept a job like she intends to do, working in the classroom like she did when she was Second Lady. Go ahead.
I do wonder, as we talk about and try to contemplate how President Trump, not that it matters, but how President Trump is going to eventually turn over the reins of power. And again, he can concede, he can not concede, he can behave like a mature adult, he can choose another way. There is also normally, and there was for the Obamas and the Trumps and the Bidens and the Pences, a handover movement. And I wonder if, even if President Trump doesn't find it within himself to do that, which would, I think, by the way, just further sully his legacy, but that's up to him. I wonder if Melania will choose a different path. I kind of think she would.
Me too.
I kind of think that First Lady Melania Trump would take the time to meet with incoming First Lady Dr. Jill Biden. I have a much easier time picturing that in my head than picturing it happening with her husband.
I remember her talking publicly about how humbled she was by Michelle Obama doing that for her when they won the White House. So I would imagine that she would do the same for her successor.
Or at least that she would want to.
Or that she would want to. I mean,
I'm
listen,
not sure.
She,
you know,
that her husband will let her?
she does her own thing.
I think there's a question about whether that would happen.
You think so?
Logistically, from a logistical perspective.
Logistically, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of logistics, so never mind the fact that we don't believe that Joe Biden has gotten a phone call, which is tradition from somebody who has been defeated. One of the other traditions that we all know about on Inauguration Day, the departing president leaves a note for the incoming president in the Resolute desk.
Oh, boy.
Think that's going to happen?
It might be, but if I were Joe Biden, if I were President-elect Biden, I wouldn't read it. I wouldn't open the envelope. I mean, I think it would be a lot. I mean, he's still. First of all, he hasn't said anything yet. The last communication we have from the president is from about 3 hours ago, an all-caps message that says, "I won this election by a lot," which is not true. He didn't win this election, and he didn't win it by a lot. And also just. I mean, again, we've come to, this has become normalized, but that's just nuts. That's a crazy thing for somebody to say.
Yeah. And it's, honestly, I mean, at this point, it's un-American. When this is done, it's done. If you didn't get enough votes, it's over. And you're supposed to gracefully exit the stage.
No, grace is not a big word in his vocabulary.
He's not going to do it, but I mean, it's going to be, as I said earlier, a transition unlike any other. I have some questions about what January 20th, 2021 is going to look like and whether he will participate in that transition of power. That is, I remember Barack Obama saying, and even George Bush talking about what that is like to be with the person you're replacing on that day. And the fact that we do that is a quintessentially American thing. It is the reason that we are the greatest democracy in the world. And I think the American people ought to know whether President Trump is willing to do that. Yes, it is symbolic, but he would really be, I think, tearing down something that does help the country move forward. If he were to bat it aside and say, I don't think this game was fair, I'm just going to walk off the field.
Well,
I think I won.
I think the American people should prepare themselves for the latter.
Yeah.
And set their expectations pretty low when it comes to how President Trump is going to deal with. I'm not saying you're suggesting otherwise, but I just think it's pretty clear, based on everything we've seen from President Trump, outgoing President Trump, throughout his career, but especially during his presidency, that he is not willing to put the concerns of the nation ahead of his own ego and his own concerns, and he is not going to rise to this moment. Now, should he prove me wrong? Wonderful. It'd be great for the country. It'd be great for his supporters. It'd be great for his legacy. Let's talk about what we expect to see in January, because we are in the middle of a pandemic. Joe Biden was not a President-elect Biden. I need to get used to that. President-elect Biden was not able to campaign and hold rallies in a normal way because we're in a pandemic. It's worse now in terms of the spread of the virus than it has been at any point throughout this pandemic. We just had the worst day ever, 125,000 Americans infected. It was the third day in a row of more than 100,000 infected. The virus is spreading. Joe Biden will not be able to have a normal inauguration or a normal inaugural ball or any of that.
No, and we, as you were talking, we just showed some of the cheering and the elation that is spilling onto the streets, largely masked elation, but it is still happening. And that kind of gathering is what Joe Biden tried to avoid for almost his entire campaign. He had drive-ins instead of rallies. And so I'm guessing that as happy as he is, that people are happy that he's going to be the next president, that's not something that he's thrilled about and not something he's going to want to see on his inauguration day.
Something that public health officials throughout the country, Democrats and Republicans, are happy about in terms of President-elect Biden's new administration is that he's going to attempt to tackle the coronavirus pandemic in a way that President Trump has not attempted. Let's go back to Jeff Zeleny in Wilmington, Delaware, for more news on that front. And Jeff, this is obviously priority list number one for President-elect Biden.
And Jake, it absolutely is. And amid the celebration we see around the country and indeed here in Wilmington, we are being told now one of the first official acts after the President-elect Biden delivers his speech here tonight will be the naming of a coronavirus task force. We're told that is going to take place on Monday. We're told it's going to be a 12-member task force that is going to be announced to lay out a plan and really get this back on track. I'm told that it's going to be sort of led by three co-chairs, including a former Surgeon General from the Obama administration era, Dr. Vivek Murthy, as well as a former FDA Commissioner, David Kessler, and a former and a current doctor at Yale University, Marcella Nunez-Smith. So those three co-chairs of this 12-member coronavirus task force to be announced on Monday, and that is going to be the beginning of what is going to be a series of very public, I'm told, speeches and announcements, and really trying to reconvey to the American people the seriousness of this crisis. We are going to expect briefings from them, perhaps daily televised briefings, and really try and seize that mantle. Now, Jake, the question here is, of course, the Trump administration is still in office. Dr. Anthony Fauci is still a government employee, so unclear how they can sort of meld this together. But at least up until now, I'm told that the Trump administration, behind the scenes, in terms of the branches of government, has been participating with the Biden transition project. So we'll see if that goes forward here. But that certainly underscores the importance of where Joe Biden is placing his priority by making this COVID-19 task force announcement on Monday his first choice. And Jake, one other bit of news. I am told that at this hour, a little more than 2 hours after the president-elect was projected, that he has still not heard from the White House or the president, who, of course, as we know, is out golfing, but certainly has his telephone with him. So at least as of this hour, he has not heard from him. He has, of course, had phone calls with Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, who I'm told held up his phone from a Brooklyn street so Joe Biden could hear all that cheering and elation, at least in Brooklyn. Jake.
All right, Jeff Zeleny in Wilmington, Delaware. Thank you so much for that report. Anderson?
Jake, thanks very much. There are also getting some tweets from a number of other people. There's a statement from former U.S. President Jimmy Carter saying, Rosalind joins me in congratulating our friends, President-elect Joe Biden and Vice President-elect Kamala Harris. We're proud of their well-run campaign and look forward to seeing the positive change they bring to our nation. And I think that you heard the Mitt Romney statement. Ann and I extend our congratulations to President-elect Joe Biden and Vice President-elect Kamala Harris. We know both of them as people of goodwill and admirable character. We pray that God may bless them in the days and years ahead.
I love it.
You go.
Look, class acts.
Yeah.
They're showing how it's supposed to be done. These are the traditions. This is how it's supposed to be. Be very partisan before the election. Make sure you draw those lines and be very clear. Don't be personal, but be very clear about the issues. Get on the right team. Fight for your team. Afterwards, shake hands and come together because, after the election, we got to move stuff forward. I just wanted to say, I'm seeing so many people happy about Kamala. And just a couple of things. One, all these young girls posting all these pictures of her all across the country, all around the world. And then there's some secrets to her success. The Divine Nine, the 9 Greek letter African-American organizations, the fraternities and sororities that got behind her, they're all thrilled. Everybody went to a black college. She went to Howard University. All those people are just going nuts. They're pillars in the black community that came together. We got assets in the black community. We got folks the black church came together behind her. So young women, the Indian American community, thrilled. This is a big, big deal. Celebrations for generations now are just bubbling out.
Yeah, I was moved by Susan Rice talking about her daughter. I remember when I was with President Obama, the impact that his election had on all these young children who all of a sudden felt like they were part of it, like they had that opportunity, that there were no limits. This is another historic event like that.
Hey, I'm trying to think have you seen sort of crowds like this in the streets? We saw Atlanta, Washington, New York, Chicago, these kind of images. Did that happen in 2008?
You know, there were spontaneous events that erupted. Obviously, we had a huge crowd in Grant Park in Chicago. There was this feeling of elation because of what that election represented. I think there is a combination here of elation and relief. It does say something about our country, you know, that people rejected divisiveness. And I think that's part of it. And there's an affection for Joe Biden because he does represent those things that people like to believe. Just in terms of character and his approach to people, they like to believe that's what our country is. That's what our leader should be. But make no mistake about it, Donald Trump, his political project was based on dividing the country relentlessly and furiously. And it had a tremendous effect. We should celebrate the incredible turnout that came out, but he drove it, and he drove his people out, and he drove his opponents out. And what you're seeing here is a sense of relief that pressure valve has been.
You're saying it goes beyond just.
It's not just, you know, for Obama, it was very much about him. For in this case, it's about Joe Biden, but it's also about the end of a period that many people felt was brutally inconsistent with their view of the way it should work. Just let me say one last thing, Gloria, on all this conjecture about what Trump will do and will he conform. He has not conformed to any of these rules, laws, norms, institutions of our democracy before. I don't anticipate he will now. But the real question is, you know, Jeff Zeleny said there's going to be a task force, a coronavirus task force named Monday by Biden. What level of cooperation are they going to get from the government that is in place now and for the next 2 months? There are all these substantive things and work that needs to be done, and it is...
That is the tradition, that there is cooperation.
When we made the transition from Obama to Bush, in every conceivable way, there was coordination between the Bush administration and the incoming Obama administration. And it wasn't because they were ideologically together on everything. It was because that is how it's supposed to work. And this is really, really important. I would love to see President Trump display a regard for these rules and laws and norms that he hasn't for 4 years. I'm not anticipating that, but I'm very concerned about what the absence of this cooperation could mean, particularly in the midst of a public health crisis.
I think what you might have is people like Tony Fauci and Deborah Birx cooperating on their own and deciding to make themselves very available, make all their information very available to the Biden task force, because they obviously have disagreed with what this administration has done. I don't think the Biden task force will be asking Dr. Scott Atlas anytime to go sit in on their meetings. So in that sense, I think there may be cooperation.
They may have a lot of time, because if the reports are true, they may be out of work.
They may be out. I want to add one thing about Jimmy Carter sending out this congratulations. I'm kind of waiting for George W. Bush. Because Donald Trump has never been a member in good standing of the President's Club. We all know that. We all know he doesn't like any of them. He's tweeted about them, particularly Bush. And the question is, at some point, at what point I should ask, will George W. Bush come out and congratulate Joe Biden? He did not participate or endorse in this campaign, which was telling in and of itself. But so long as these legal challenges are going on, the question that I have is about a lot of Republicans, but including the former president. When is he going to come out and say, okay, you lost, Joe Biden won, and I need to congratulate him? Because as David is saying, in his own transition, he was so remarkable with the Obama administration. And clearly he understands how important this transition is. And I'm just wondering whether he's going to put his thumb on the scale here and say, you know what, he won.
Well, I don't know of any president who's been more apolitical since he left office than George W.
Bush. Oh, but it's not a political statement. Well,
but the point is, I mean, he didn't go out and campaign for his brother when his brother was running for president. I mean, so let's put that in context here, that, you know, to sort of now turn to George W. Bush as someone who's going to sort of set the tone. George W. Bush when he left, and I've met with him a few times, not many times, but a few times, and he is done. He's done. And so I don't look. I'm just saying, don't look for him to sort of put step into this
So is he
moment,
gonna
because
wait?
it's been very clear that he's not. He's letting the country go its own way, and he's not going to be putting a stamp on it one way or the other. That's number one. Number two, these celebrations, which is an opportunity, in my opinion. I'm not saying this to be critical. They're not about Joe Biden. I mean, they're about Donald Trump. It's releasing the pressure, and the oppression is over, and all the things that you guys are saying here. It's not about Joe Biden. So, and again, I'm not saying that to be critical. I'm saying that it's an opportunity.
In what way?
It's an opportunity because, in many respects, Joe Biden comes back to this town with not a big agenda that the people think he has. That's why they voted for him. They didn't vote for him because of his agenda. They voted for him because he was not Donald Trump.
So he has more flexibility.
So he has a lot more flexibility. And again, coming back to Georgia, and what's going to happen down there in the next 2 months, with a Senate victory or 2 Senate victories by Republicans, and not this Joe Biden didn't run on a big. He in fact made a very big point of the fact that he wasn't the hard left, and he was going to be more of a conciliator, uniter, and a moderate. So there's not this clear agenda that I think the public,
but I will say something.
The majority of the
There's
public,
certainly a lot of expectations, though.
Expectations.
Yeah.
And so this is now we're going to see Joe Biden's political skill, because on the one hand he wants to have a reset, on the other hand he owes his base a lot, and you have an African American community that expects to be treated like the people who delivered. And there should be no apology for it. And Frank, one good thing about Donald Trump, he removed the taboo of speaking directly to black people about black stuff. He said, I'm going to do a platinum plan for you black people, and made no apology. You go, well, affirmative action, I feel guilty about that. It's got to be for everybody. He said, I'm going to help you black folks. And so that removes the taboo. Biden can now reach out to the black community, not to exclude anybody else, but to say, listen, here's what we're going to do. And I think the African American community is uniquely deserving of that level of support and investment, given the investment of the African American community in this party. And I think we should be very clear. This is not about left versus right. A lot of the things that would be good for the African American community would be good for anybody, but we've got to get past. I don't think that the Trump administration felt any remorse or guilt about helping white male evangelicals and that kind of thing. They embrace their base. We want to be embraced. I also think that, so now how does Biden do that? Is Biden going to be able to meet, I think, the just needs of his base? Don't forget, the black community has been knocked on its butt by COVID. We got hit first and worst, both in terms of health, in terms of wealth, in terms of job loss. We are in pain. And the person that Biden defeated was willing to talk about that directly. Trump, people didn't like it, but he was talking about it. Can Biden do that? And at the same time, can he reach out to those same suburban voters and some Trump voters and say, here's what we're going to do for you on infrastructure, et cetera. But it's not a left versus right pressure. There will be some left pressure on Medicare for all or whatever. That's not his problem. His problem is he's got a bunch of people of color who got just practical needs. If they don't get met at all in the next 4 years, the country has a problem, not just Biden.
Can I just respond to you, Rick? I think that the people in this country grew more enthusiastic, Biden supporters, grew more enthusiastic about his candidacy as time went on. And you saw that in the polling. Yes. And it is because they got to know him, and his personal decency came through, his empathy came through. So while there's obviously anti-Trump in the demonstrations out there, I wouldn't underestimate the fact that Biden voters decided that they really wanted this guy, and he was the man for the moment, because you couldn't put him in a box. He had 47 years of public service, and you couldn't say, okay, is he a raging socialist, as Donald Trump tried to portray him? So there was a little bit of Joe Biden that people could look at and say, I like that about him. I like that about him. But most of all, they're celebrating his values. So while it is anti-Trump, it's also celebration about American values and dignity and what people want to see in a president of the United States.
I agree. And I agree with your point that they saw Biden as an alternative to the friction that Donald Trump created. My point was they didn't, a lot of people, Vance people did, but a lot of people didn't vote for him because they thought he was going to come with a very strong, left-wing agenda. Right. In fact, he was trying to make, I'm not going to stop fracking. I'm not going to tax middle income. I'm not going to do all these things. I'm not Bernie Sanders. I won because I'm not Bernie Sanders.
I don't know what you mean by.
But those are not the people in the street.
Right.
My point, there's not the people in the streets right now.
I don't know what you mean by Vance people, but I will say this. There is a really deep concern in this country about health care. Okay, and Joe Biden spoke to it. There's a really deep concern about the imbalance in our economy, where you can work as hard as you can and can't get ahead if you're an average person, and if you are privileged to start with, or if you're on Wall Street or in a C-suite, you get through good times and bad, pandemic, you come out okay. They want to see action on things like health care, on child care. These are not, you guys think these are left issues. These are life issues for most Americans, and that is what has changed.
Yeah, amen.
The debate has shifted, and Biden did speak to that in the campaign. I think people did understand that he was more likely to do something about the problems that were touching their lives, at least the majority of people who voted for him. So I would not underestimate that. I think it's really important. But you're right, Gloria. We should give him his due. I don't want to in any way deprive him of his due. Joe Biden became more popular through the final months of his campaign. That's pretty unusual. He was under assault. The president was beating up on him. And he became more popular as people got to know him. And I think that is a credit to him.
And that question cares about people like me. Does this person care about people like me? Joe Biden kept going up and up and up. He cares about people like me. Donald Trump went in the other direction.
There was value for him just in purely political terms, in terms of getting elected, in not being as present on the campaign trail. Not only did it make it a harder target for President Trump to attack and try to kind of define, it also allowed different kinds of voters to kind of see different things in him without being confronted on a daily basis with different policy positions, and kind of, as you said, pick the part of him that they liked and say, okay, that's enough for me to vote for.
And it allowed him to differentiate himself by giving speeches about policy, about COVID, about American values, and not being at rallies all the time where you're just playing with the crowd. They ran a different campaign, but it worked to their advantage. And as someone here was saying before, what may have happened with Donald Trump is that the more people saw him at those rallies, yes, it brought out some voters, but the more maybe some undecided voters saw him at those rallies, they were hearing grievance after grievance about himself and what he was suffering, not their own grievances.
If Biden was so popular in the positions that he was giving, then why did not a single Republican lose a House seat? Why did Republicans pick up seats in the House? Why did Republicans pick up state legislatures? Why did the Republicans maintain control of the Senate when they were given no chance
because
of doing
Donald
so?
Trump was his own worst enemy. That's why.
Okay, well, you could. But my point
there's
is,
a simpler reason.
the policies.
Trump, you know this, Rick. You said it earlier. Trump did whip up a huge turnout among his base. And in districts and states where Republicans have a natural advantage, they reap the benefits of that there. I don't think I don't.
My point is, a lot of people who voted for Joe Biden because they didn't like Donald Trump voted for Republicans down ballot, which means policy-wise, they wanted Republicans. They liked the policies. They didn't like Donald Trump.
I was looking at the Senate races today, and the Republicans who won for the Senate in those, except for Susan Collins, they ran almost neck and neck.
But they all ran ahead.
Just in terms of the challenges facing, you talked about President Obama in 2008, when you went to visit him soon after he had declared, and you could see the weight of that.
Yes.
The weight of what the challenge is that he faces, and he and Vice President-elect Kamala Harris face. I mean, they're very aware of the difficulties that they are stepping into,
And I want to
within
speak to that after
even
you
within their own party. I mean, they have there's a lot of expectations from hundreds of thousands of people who marched this summer, and a lot of people calling for defunding police, which Joe Biden never called for, said he wasn't supportive of, and most, seriously, you can look at the poll results and you can look at the election results and say there's not a lot of Americans who have a lot of support for that across the country.
Right, but Biden, Biden didn't run on those issues, and he was right in the debate. It didn't endear him to a lot of Democrats when Trump was attacking him on health care, and he said, you must be mistaking me for some of these other people who I beat in the primary. He positioned himself as a center-left Democrat. He's going to govern as a center-left Democrat, and I think that there are a lot of there's a lot of support nationally in the middle of that electorate. But as I said to Rick, I think the goalposts have been shifted to where you can't ignore an issue like health care. You can't ignore an issue like the wage gap. You can't, these things have become life issues for people, and they're not left issues for people. So I think Biden will govern as a center-left Democrat, but that doesn't mean he's not going to have a progressive agenda.
The thing about Biden is that he has been here before. I mean, when you guys were elected, you had the economic crisis, and he knows what it's like to kind of get in there and go. And I think they're ready for it. I think they understand the moment they are in. And that is why you're going to have this COVID task force named on Monday. I think Joe Biden gets it because he's been there. And that's, a lot of people say, oh, he's been in government for too long, and 47 years. But he understands how to get things done. He considers himself a pragmatist. And I would argue that if you end up with a Republican Senate, it's going to make life a little easier for him because he's going to be able to say to Van Jones, this is what we could get. Don't, the perfect can be the enemy of the good, right?
Yeah, well, look, I think there's a real danger here. And I think we're going to have to come together as a country and deal with this. You have two things that don't go together. You are almost certainly going to have gridlock. If you just if nobody does anything any different. If McConnell says, I'm going to make him a one-term president, if the left says we're going to fight till the last dog barks, you're going to have gridlock and rising pain and fear on both sides. Those two things don't go well together. You have people in the urban environments don't forget, people are standing in food lines right now. Food lines in America. People, 2-3 hours to get a little box of food that has to last all week. People are facing an eviction crisis right now. People are facing a healthcare disaster right now. So you got real pain, economic pain in the urban parts of this country. They need relief. In the rural parts, you have economic pain and also cultural fear. The senator just said, are they going to crack down on Christianity? You've got rising pain and fear on both sides and gridlock in the nation's capital. That is the most dangerous thing for this country. And so it's going to take real political skill on Biden's part. It's going to take some real political courage on the Republicans' part. And it's going to take, I don't think people are thinking this thing all the way through. The Supreme Court may knock out Obamacare next week or whatever, next month. Now you're going to have people who don't have health care insurance. These are the kinds of things that you can lose your country over. And so Joe Biden is coming in. I think America is blessed to have this guy. I think they're blessed because I think he does have those political skills. I think he wants to bring people together. He knows how to cut deals. But it's going to take people, including me and you, Senator, to get together and find a path forward, or we're going to have a big mess.
Well, you look at things that Joe Biden can do, and without Republicans or the Congress. I mean, increasingly, and this is one of the concerns that conservatives have right now, and many voters have right now, is that started, in my opinion, started by Barack Obama, and I complained about it vociferously, and then even expanded more by Donald Trump, and I complained about it vociferously, was the use of executive orders. And executive orders that could be counter to what, in my opinion, or draw to the greatest extent what the statute says. And so how far is he going to go? He's going to get huge pressure from the left on immigration, for example, and other things to sort of try to redo the legislative landscape just by executive order and say, well, I can't get things through the Congress, so I'm going to do this. Trump did it. Obama did it. And in some cases got slapped down by the courts for doing it. And so how far is Joe Biden going to go? That's number one. That if you want to show that you want to work on a bipartisan basis, then you don't go out right away and sign all the executive orders on immigration and bypass.
You know, I remember in 2000. I remember when Mitch McConnell said that his principal goal, this was in the first term of Obama, was to defeat President Obama. And if you come to the table with that attitude, if you come to the table with the attitude that I'm going to try and weaponize these issues in a way that will disadvantage the president to defeat him, if you do that in the middle of a crisis, and that's what we faced in 2009, you know, you may get rewarded by it politically, but it really is a dereliction.
Well, and so that brings up another issue. Hold on, it brings up another issue that's really important because obviously the Democrats weaponized the Russia investigation and all these investigations and Trump throughout the entire time, and then impeachments and things like that. And we know there's this issue out there, hanging out there, with respect to the Biden family and what the Republicans may do in the Senate. Look, I'm just saying this is an issue, and I'm suggesting Republicans should pause here a little bit before they go hog wild into doing what the Democrats did 4 years ago, trying to bring scandal into the investigation.
I would agree on that. I will say that something has to be done to give relief to the immigrant community, and I hope that Biden does do something. But I think you've been trying to get.
Well, yeah, I think that it's interesting to hear you talk about executive orders now, saying, "Oh, I don't want Biden to do this," when this has been a president who's been governing by executive order.
I said I disagree with the
president. And if Biden wants to undo some of the things that he believes Donald Trump has done that are wrong, then he'll do it by executive order.
As Trump did to Obama.
As he said, he's not a fan of executive order, but this is one way that you can get things done quickly. It's just the way things operate right now, and I fully expect that Joe Biden's going to do that. The first week after he becomes president, some of that may have to do with
it's how far he goes. How far does he go?
And Gloria, I agree with you. Look, there's going to be some culture war stuff that the right is not going to like. We're going to have to do something on immigrants. We can't keep mistreating folks at the border. We can't keep mistreating dreamers. That's going to have to stop. That might make people on the right mad. But Gloria, what I think is that he's going to have to do some of that, but then he's got to figure out some way to reach out. And that's what I'm saying. That's what I think.
You're right, Van. When I was in the White House and Biden was the vice president, he had the best ear of anyone there for working class white voters or Americans. We weren't talking about voters and what the impact of various policies would be, how they would be received. He had an ear for that. He had an instinct for that. That will serve him well in the project that you're talking about. And that's one of the reasons why he will be a good person for this time. But, if they fail to act on those issues that you mentioned that are of immediate urgency, anyone who stands in the way of trying to help the American people right now in a really difficult time does so at their own political peril, I think.
One thing I think Biden won't do is try and inflame the situation. And what we are used to is a president who stirs the pot any chance he can get. And what we've heard from Joe Biden in his speeches so far is, I want to unite the country. Even if you didn't vote for me, I want to be your president too. I'm going to listen to you. So it's a totally different tone. And the question is whether the people in the Senate, in particular, who are on the losing side of this, are so stuck that that they can't move a little because the country is so polarized. And we know we've got gerrymandering in the House, and there's very little advantage to conservatives for moving to the center because they're going to be primaried on the right, and we understand that that's the process. We have to find out if Joe Biden is living in an outmoded world, whether this is the art of the possible.
Just on a kind of logistical, for the next several weeks, obviously, look, President Trump is still president of the United States and will be up until the time he's not. How much you've talked about the cooperation that usually takes place, given what is still going on the Trump side of this equation, what do the next months look like in terms, if Vice President Biden announces this coronavirus task force on Monday, does the sitting president start to traditionally kind of take into account what the incoming president wants?
Traditionally, well, I'll give you an example. Barack Obama asked George W. Bush to extend some aid to the auto industry till March of 2009 because GM and Chrysler were in distress, and he wanted some time in office just to consider what the steps were, the long-term steps that should be taken to deal with that situation. And President Bush embraced the short-term relief at the request of President Obama. There are a lot of issues that are transitional from one administration to another right now, particularly in the middle of a crisis, where coordination and conversation would be and normally your chief of staff would be speaking, the incoming chief of staff would be talking to the team that's coming in, and there would be a high level of coordination. I have great fears that that's not going to happen here.
Well, let's go back to Wolf.
All right, take a look at this. CNN now projects also another win for the president-elect of the United States, Joe Biden. CNN projects that Nevada and its 6 electoral votes will go for President-elect Biden. That will bring his total right now up to 279 electoral votes. You need 270. He's got 279 right now. Trump still has 213. Let's go over to John King over at the Magic Wall and see what's going on right now. That number could go up and up and up. There's still 2 other states where the president-elect could get some electoral votes and build it up potentially to 306.
It could, Wolf. And on this decisive day and a day of celebration for Joe Biden and for the Democratic Party and, of course, for Vice President-elect Harris, this is a critical calculation. You know now you will take over. In 74 days, there will be an inauguration outside the United States Capitol, and Joe Biden will become the President of the United States because of those 20, Pennsylvania. But now we've just added Nevada, which gets you to 279. And now, in a divided America, after a very polarizing election where, yes, Joe Biden got a record number of votes, but so did Donald Trump. Donald Trump got the 2nd number of votes ever in a race for presidency. We don't expect him to go away. We expect him to leave the White House, but not to go away. So if you're Joe Biden, what happens with the rest of this map is actually quite critical. Pennsylvania and its 20 put you over the top. What an important victory for Joe Biden. Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin. That's what he said at the beginning of the campaign. When there was so much doubt in the Democratic Party about, is this the right man for this nomination? He said, I'm the best guy to do that. Today he can say, I told you so. That's not the way he's going to say it, but he's going to say, look at that. I said I could do it. So the challenge now, Wolf, when you think about this, is you're looking at this map. What a statement this would be. Georgia may well go to a recount, but Joe Biden's lead has increased. We'll go into those numbers a little bit later. Not since Bill Clinton in 1992. 1992. That's the year we met in Little Rock, Arkansas. Not since then.
We both covered that.
Right. Not since then has a Democrat turned that state blue. It's important. Joe Biden is going to have an evenly divided Senate. Maybe the Republicans are in charge by a seat or 2. Maybe the Democrats are in charge in a 50-50. He's going to have an evenly divided American. It helps a bit to be able to say, I won in Georgia. Then right now, also, Joe Biden is leading here in Arizona. Again, a state no Democrat has carried since Bill Clinton in 1996. It would help, again, to be able to say, if you're Joe Biden, to say, I'm stretching the map. I won in Georgia. I won in Arizona. Does it win you a lot of votes? That'll be the challenge for Joe Biden ahead. But if you can build this map up to 306, we do believe the rest of this. We're not done yet, but we do believe the rest of this. President Trump has been leading. We're still counting votes in Maine. 2nd congressional district. Maine and Nebraska are the 2 states that allocate their electoral votes by congressional district. Let's assume the president wins this one. Come along with me here. There we go. Oh, it doesn't want to go. There we go. All right. Maybe it's my fingers have lost their heat sensitivity. Who knows? North Carolina, the president's leading, and Alaska, the president is leading. So at the possibility, 306, 232, if you're into history and nostalgia and things like that, it was 306, 232.
4 years ago.
4 years ago. It was a flip side. 306 to 232. And it's actually interesting. You see the circles on this map. On Nevada, we had circles because we expect Joe Biden to carry that. We just called it. So Joe Biden will carry that. That was a Clinton state. But this is the important part for Joe Biden politically in an evenly divided country. Will it work? We'll see. But he can argue, I flipped that, I flipped that, I flipped that. And he can argue, I flipped that, and I flipped that. So that is a big deal. When you have a map-changing election, it gives you some leverage in the political conversations. Again, how much will be the challenge now that Joe Biden has proven, remember all the doubters at the beginning, right? Is he the right man for this moment? Can he beat Donald Trump? Should the Democratic Party elect this man from the past to lead it into the future? Well, he's the president-elect now, and this map will help him make the case. Is he up to it? That'll be the next challenge. But as was just being noted in the other conversation, President Trump is president for 74 more days, 73 more days. Joe Biden will put together his team. And again, you look at the map.
That was 4 years ago.
That was four.
I want our viewers to know.
That was 4 years ago. That was 4 years ago. Let's fast forward to now. I wanted to use it as an example to show Donald Trump won. We remember what that did to the Democratic Party. Joe Biden can say a little bit, again, it's not the way he talks, but I told you so. Look what I did. I promised you I would change this map, and I delivered on my promise. In the governing challenge, it helps to be able to say you made a very big, dramatic political statement. You still have to get the votes, still have to advance your policies. He's going to have to deal with internal Democratic fights, as well as then an obstinate Republican Party that is still going to have ex-President Trump trying to hold it in its grip. So the challenges are huge. So the bigger you can run up that total, the more leverage you have.
4 years ago, Trump said he won in a landslide when he had 306. Let's see what he says about Biden winning potentially if he wins these two other states with 306.
To that point, remember, not since George H.W. Bush, we have had 3 successive two-term presidents in a row. Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, and Barack Obama. It is hard. It is hard to defeat an incumbent president. So when you, A, defeat that incumbent president, even though he got more votes, Donald Trump got more votes now than he did 4 years ago. When you defeat him, and then you defeat him with a number like that, it gives Joe Biden some leverage. He says it's a mandate. That's the question to be answered.
So far, more than 4 million votes. Let's go to David Chalian. David, CNN was first to project that President-elect Biden was the winner of this election. Walk us through how our decision desk, our folks, came up with that, and we made this decision. It's not just a decision you make or I make or John King makes. There are a lot of people involved in this.
Yeah, no, we have an entire team of professionals. They are statistical professionals and experts. And, you know, all eyes were on Pennsylvania, and we were watching that Pennsylvania vote come in. And as we kept saying is we needed more vote to get to a certain threshold, an extraordinarily high confidence threshold that there was no way that Donald Trump in second place was going to be able to overtake Joe Biden in first place in the state of Pennsylvania. We were looking at in Nevada and Arizona and Georgia where Joe Biden was leading as well. But in the state of Pennsylvania, we finally, after that last batch of votes that came in from Philadelphia late this morning, we were able to see the margin that Biden had in Pennsylvania grow beyond 30,000 votes. Knowing what we knew about everything outstanding, the provisional ballots not yet counted, some of the mail ballots not yet counted, and how they were behaving and where they were coming from within the Commonwealth, well, that got us to that extraordinarily high level of confidence, like 99.7% certainty that there was no way that Donald Trump was going to be able to overtake Joe Biden, and that was able to make the call. But I do just want to add to what John King was saying broadly here. When you do look at how Joe Biden put back together, rebuilt that so-called blue wall that he promised he would, and expand a little bit into the Sun Belt in Arizona and Georgia. In these extraordinarily polarized times in American politics, winning the middle still matters. And what you see across the electorate nationally, remember, Donald Trump 4 years ago, he won independents in this country, people that identify themselves as independent. He won them by 4 points. Well, Joe Biden won them by 14 points in this country, and he did in a lot of the states where he flipped them from Trump states now to Biden states. So although we are polarized, and it was certainly a high turnout election, obviously, and both sides got their bases out, there was also an argument to the middle, to the political middle in this country, that Joe Biden won pretty resoundingly, Wolf.
Yeah, and speaking of turnout, John, let's take a look at it's amazing how many Americans voted in this election. There's a coronavirus pandemic. We had record numbers, 93% of the estimated electorate out there. So far, we've counted that. But look at those numbers.
And so there's conversations about this election will continue for months and years. Here's one lesson we hope every state takes and that the national government takes as well. If you give people more opportunities to vote, even in a pandemic, you can vote by mail, you can vote early more, expand that. Look what happens. Look what happens. That is a record-setting number for a candidate, the victorious candidate for President of the United States. And guess what? Democrats won't like this. That is the second highest vote total for any candidate for President of the United States ever. Turnout was up in this election. Everyone should celebrate that. Republicans aren't celebrating today, or at least not Trump supporters, but that is a number to celebrate. And let's just look at this right now. Let's look at this right now. The lead for Joe Biden, more than 4.1 million votes. Remember 4 years ago, Democrats remember this well. Hillary Clinton won the popular vote quite convincingly. Not that convincingly, and guess what? I'll just turn off the telestration for a minute. Guess what? We're not done here. We're not done here. Let me turn this one off. I'm sorry, make that go away. Let's look out at California right now. If those numbers are not going to turn that off so it doesn't come up. Look at what has to be counted still. Only 77% of the vote counted in California. This is a blue state. That number for Joe Biden is absolutely going to increase. And again, I was talking earlier, 306 electoral votes. Joe Biden believes gives him some leverage. David Challenge is talking about winning the middle. That is important. How important, we'll see. We live in polarized times, but more votes from California. They're still counting in New York State, 81% there. It's a big blue state. Joe Biden's getting nearly 60% of the vote. So there is no doubt that Joe Biden's lead in the popular vote will extend itself as we go forward. So that's important too. How important? That's what the first 100 days of the new administration will tell us. But when you have a sweeping win in the Electoral College, when you have a dramatic, historic win in the popular vote, and when you can say, look at my margin. Now, Republicans will say, okay, but that's it's all out in California. It's all out in New York. How did you do in the red states? Sure, that will be the fight ahead, but it helps.
Show us Texas.
It helps. You bring up Texas. One of the interesting things about Texas is remember all those Democratic hopes. Democrats have high hopes, and they have moved Texas slowly their way. In a presidential year, though, what we did learn is that Texas is still tough. It's a tough pull for the Democrats. They're making progress. You see Houston, Harris County. You see Dallas is blue in the suburbs around it. Austin, San Antonio, Laredo, out in El Paso, blue, but all this red in the middle. 52% for President Trump. Look at the vote total up. You go back 4 years ago, 52% for President Trump. Hillary Clinton at 44 there if you round up. The third-party candidates had a bit more influence, but 43.5 for the Democrats 4 years ago, 46. So Joe Biden and Democrats can make the case. Maybe it's another step forward. Democrats, I think, have been overly optimistic about how quickly they can flip this state, but there is no doubt that they are making more progress, and that's because of the growth, especially Harris County, where Houston is. Again, physically, it's the size of Rhode Island. If it left Texas, it would be the 25th largest state in the United States. This is a growing powerhouse in American politics, Harris County, Texas, within the state and beyond. And those are the things we'll go through over the next few weeks. Today is decisive day. Joe Biden becomes president-elect. Kamala Harris is about to make history as the first woman and first woman of color as vice president. And we will study all this as we go through the next several weeks to see what changed. I've been going through some of the states, and actually not a ton changed in terms of, we look off, and I can put them up here for you. Let me come in. This is America by county, right? America by county. And you look at this map, and again, Democrats win on the coasts. Republicans tend to win in the middle. Democrats get mad when you show this map because it looks so much more red, and yet the Democratic candidate has an overwhelming win in the popular vote. That's because, yes, the coasts are more populous than the middle of America. But middle of America still gets 2 senators, right? And so, Democrats always say we have more people because we have more votes. That is why they have a House majority. But if you watch all this play out, but Wolf, just one thing I want to show you. One of the things I look at are pivot counties. There are more than 200 of them, 206 counties that voted twice for Barack Obama and then flipped to Donald Trump. So one of my questions coming into 2020 was how many of those can Joe Biden pull back? How many of those can he say, I understand you didn't like Hillary Clinton or you didn't like Washington. I speak to you. Please come back. Not all that many as we look. Not all that many. We'll get a final total. Some places are still counting. Not all that many. But in the state that made Joe Biden president, 2 of the 3, Erie County and Northampton County, did flip back. In a state that is incredibly close, Pennsylvania, Joe Biden did what he needed to do here. And again, Joe Biden will view this as a big victory because this is what he set out to do on day one when a lot of Democrats said he couldn't do it. Blue-collar places. You grew up in Buffalo. You know what Erie is like. These are blue-collar, hardworking people, people who work with their hands, middle-class families. It's very close. It's very close, but this is the kind of win that Joe Biden will take. It was close, Erie County 4 years ago, 49-47 for Trump. Joe Biden gets it back just by a little bit as you come up to 2020. But you say just by a little bit. When you take this off, sometimes just by a little bit matters. Just by a little bit made Joe Biden president.
34,414 vote lead the President-elect Biden now has over Trump. David Chalian, the national picture, record numbers of voters out there, and Biden got more than 4 million more votes than Trump, but there's still plenty of votes out there. We don't have the full picture, and it could take days and days until all those votes are actually counted.
It could take a week or two until we really get a sense when all the certification deadlines come and we get that final approved total in each of these states. You remember, Wolf, in 2018, when the Democrats had that big wave year in the House of Representatives, so many of those races were in California that helped deliver the Democrats their majority. We had to wait for a while, many days, for all that vote to get counted and get a real sense of the picture. And I think the same is true here, especially given what we've just experienced over the last 5 days, this election during a pandemic when so many millions of Americans were voting by mail for the first time. And these elections officials across the country, God bless them all for doing their jobs, it just takes a while to count all that mail vote. So we're going to be a few days, a week or so, 10 days maybe, until we have a real picture of that final tally in the national popular vote, till we have a real sense of just how much Joe Biden did expand the map. And I just think, you don't want to draw too many conclusions about sort of how America settled finally into this election until you see that full vote total at the end of the day. We know Joe Biden and Donald Trump each made history here as the two presidential candidates with the highest vote total in American history. It was a hugely engaged electorate, and they got their sides out, obviously Joe Biden more so. And I just think when we get a more and more of this vote in, especially from California, you're just going to see Joe Biden's lead in the national vote grow to an even greater place in history.
And explain to our viewers, David, why there was this record national turnout. So many millions of people actually voted one way or another, whether early, day of, mail-in, absentee. They voted in these huge record numbers, even in the midst of the coronavirus pandemic.
Yeah, well, one is the access to vote if you're voting by mail, and this will be studied now. Does that bring more people into the process? Is at the end of the day, did that get more people engaged in voting because it was something that they could do in their home and then drop it in the mailbox? There were so many states, Wolf, especially states across the Midwest, that really had no big history in vote by mail, in absentee voting. You needed a real legitimate excuse in order to get an absentee ballot in a lot of these states. And that went away with the coronavirus. So those states said, no, you don't need an excuse anymore. Now you can vote by mail. And there was a lot of encouragement from political actors on the Democratic side specifically to do so. And so I think you're going to see now an electorate that has experienced what it's like to have multiple options and multiple ways to cast its ballot. And it may be something that's now here as a part of our future long after coronavirus hopefully goes away.
Very, very important indeed. John, we're talking about the Democrats winning the White House, but there's a House of Representatives that's been at play as well. The Democrats look like they're going to still be in the majority, but they've lost a bunch of seats.
Right, so the margins mean everything, because I'll break it down in just a second. But let's, so Joe Biden will be president. We'll have a Democratic president, right? Donald Trump will leave. But right now, the balance of power in the Senate is still up at play. There'll be 2 runoffs in January in Georgia, but it'll be evenly divided either way. Either the Republicans will have it by a seat or 2, or the Democrats will get it 50-50. So an evenly divided Washington there. So what about the House of Representatives? Well, here's where we came into Election Day. 232 Democrats, 1 Libertarian, and 197 Republicans, right? And so now where are we now? We're not quite to the finish line here. We're still counting in some of these races, but the Democrats are down to 222 seats at the moment. This is ahead. 222 seats where Democrats are leading right now, 213 where Republicans are leading. This is very significant. 15 Republicans are leading in districts right now held by Democrats. Only 3 Democrats are leading in districts right now held by Republicans. Now, these are the races we have called, and you see the numbers go down because we're still counting votes. Just like in the presidential race, we're still counting votes. The Democrats will hold the majority. They have 212 right now called, Republicans 197. But again, the final composition, how much of a majority does Nancy Pelosi have, assuming she's reelected as Speaker? How does Joe Biden have relationships with that House? How many of the centrist Democrats, Kendra Horn in Oklahoma, for example, gone? Right. So what is the composition? Is it more liberals because more conservative Democrats lose? Do they put pressure on Joe Biden on issues like climate change and on health care, and then he has to deal with the Senate calculations? So the presidency is the big story today, obviously, because Donald Trump is now going to be a one-term president. Joe Biden will become the president-elect in 74 days. But this is a fascinating finish for Joe Biden, and you're trying to figure out how much leverage do I have. Again, last night he said he believes he has a mandate. We will hear from him tonight outlining his policy agenda. He will have Democratic allies in the House, but a smaller majority, without a doubt, a smaller Democratic majority in the House, and then the uncertainty of the Senate. So as he plans these early steps for the next several days at least, and through the middle of January, when it comes to those runoffs in Georgia, Joe Biden cannot be exactly sure of the balance of power and the leverage he will and will not have here in Washington when it comes to huge issues. Remember, he's promised to act on climate change. He wants a fundamental different tax code than Donald Trump. He wants to build on Obamacare. Remember the fights on Obamacare back in the Obama administration? Barack Obama then had a Democratic House, and they had the Senate at first, and then the Republicans came sweeping in the 2010 midterm. So there are big issues on the table in a very still evenly divided Washington, even though we'll have a new Democratic president.
Yeah, you and I spoke to several of the House Democratic leaders over these past several weeks. They were expecting to gain seats. The Democrats would gain seats in the House. They're losing seats in the House of Representatives, so they're obviously deeply disappointed in that the Republicans have been picking up seats.
And that gets back to this. That does get back to this, that the President of the United States lost. The President of the United States is a one-term president. The President of the United States who said, I can't believe I would ever lose to Joe Biden. Any election I lose in is rigged. Well, he lost to Joe Biden, and it's not rigged. However, he did, because he did turn out his vote. Because of that record-setting vote, President Trump actually helped his party in this election. There's no doubt about that. When you look at the close Senate races, when you look at least a handful or more Republican gains in the House, Republican turnout was up. And when it comes to House races, Republican turnout has to be up where Republicans live in those House districts. There's absolutely no question. President Trump helped his party even as he lost this election. That is just undeniable. And you see it in places like North Carolina, where we haven't called this yet for the president, but he is leading here, and the Republican candidate leading in the Senate race. There's just absolutely no question. Even in South Carolina, Lindsey Graham was on the ballot. Everyone thought, is that a close race? Wolf, in the end, it was not. Donald Trump carried South Carolina. Lindsey Graham, his friend, won re-election. Wolf?
Take a look at this, John. We'll show our viewers the celebrations that are going on around the country. Celebrations that Joe Biden is now the president-elect of the United States, whether in Atlanta or Chicago, Washington, D.C., New York, Philadelphia. People have just gone out on the streets. They are so excited, so happy right now. They're celebrating, this is in Washington, near Lafayette Park over there, the Black Lives Matter Plaza, as it's called now. You see the folks in D.C., and this is Philadelphia, what's going on in Philadelphia right now. They're so excited. They're wearing masks. They're not much social distancing, but they are at least wearing masks. Jake?
Wolf, among the historic firsts that are occurring with this election, one that probably not a lot of people care about, but my next guest does, Senator Chris Coons, a Democrat from Delaware. Joe Biden will be the first president from Delaware. Congratulations on that, and congratulations on your friend becoming elected president-elect, Senator.
Thank you, Jake. This is a remarkable day where Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are now clearly on track to be our next president and vice president. And the people of Delaware are just jubilant. I mean, there were tears of joy, cowbells, cars honking, people cheering in my neighborhood when the announcement was made that a number of major news organizations had called the election for Joe Biden. And frankly, I think Ruth Bader Ginsburg and John Lewis and John McCain are looking down on us and smiling. It was thrilling to hear the sounds of jubilation that you just played from cities and towns across the country. We've got a lot of tough work ahead to bring this country together, but today's a day to celebrate.
Have you spoken with President-elect Biden today?
I have not spoken with him yet today. A number of the senior members of the campaign team and I have talked and texted, but I'm excited for his speech tonight. There will be a record crowd down at the riverfront and fireworks that I think will light up the sky for all Delawareans.
What does Joe Biden need to say in his first speech to the country as president-elect? What are you anticipating that he'll do?
Well, Jake, the thing about Joe's campaign for the presidency is he's been remarkably consistent since he first announced in Philadelphia last April to that landmark speech he gave recently in Gettysburg to his recent remarks in Warm Springs, Georgia. He's been focused on bringing our country together, on governing as an American president, not a Democratic president, and as someone who's got the vision and the plans to bring us out of this mess, to address the pandemic, together with his vice president, to build back better our economy, and to tackle long unresolved issues of racial injustice. This is an historic day, not just for Joe and Delaware, but for Kamala Harris and for all of us who are excited to see the first black woman who is the daughter of immigrants ascend to the vice presidency. This is a day where I think Joe's message and Kamala's message will be one of unity, focusing on the very challenging work ahead and of respecting the differences between the 75 million Americans who will have voted for Joe and Kamala and the roughly 70 million who will have voted for Donald Trump and Mike Pence, and finding a way forward together.
Well, let's talk about those 70 million, because President-elect Biden has talked for a long time about his desire to unite the country, to heal divisions. 70 million Americans didn't vote for him. Now, I get 75 million did, but how to unify the country when the nation is so deeply divided?
It's going to be challenging, but I'll remind you, the American people have become exhausted with 4 years of just relentless chaos, with tweeting at 3 in the morning, with unpredictability, with a president who was more skilled at maintaining a reality TV audience than he was at actually leading as president. And so Joe's going to have to come out of the gate with a number of initiatives and proposals that will be focused to win bipartisan support. And that will be challenging in the Senate, particularly if Mitch McConnell is the majority leader. But the things that are right in front of us to do, tackling the pandemic, developing and distributing a vaccine, coming up with a bipartisan investment package that will rebuild our roads and bridges and buy American and put people back to work. These are things that can and should be bipartisan initiatives before we get on to some of the more challenging issues like health care or climate change.
All right, Senator Chris Coons, Democrat of Delaware, longtime supporter of former Vice President, now President-elect Joe Biden. Congratulations. Drinks are on me at the Rusty Rudder tonight.
Thanks, Jake.
Talk to you later.
Big day for
That
Delaware.
was some beach humor.
A little Delaware bar. Yeah, I mean, it's you get a little sense of the joy people feel about their hometowns by how obnoxious I am about being from Philadelphia. That's an entire state that has never elected a president before. Right. And now Joe Biden is not just a Delawarean. He is the most famous Delawarean in the world.
And Chris Coons has Joe Biden's old Senate seat.
Yeah.
And so not only is Joe Biden a mentor to him, he is a predecessor in the United States Senate. And, you know, he, like so many Democrats, worked really, really hard to get Joe Biden to the place he is today as president-elect. One of the questions I have as I was watching him is, will he just, CNN projected that he's going to go on for his second full term in the Senate. He was up on the ballot with Joe Biden, but is he going to stay there? Is he going to go into a Biden cabinet? I mean, he's an important member of the Foreign Relations Committee. Will he want to do that? So that's one question. And it leads me to think about all the other spaces that Joe Biden is going to have to fill and how he's going to have that balancing act that we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, and I mean, and Coons, in addition to being a very decent person, as we all know him to be, is one of the more moderate Democrats. And there's been a debate about what some of the more liberal Democratic allies of Joe Biden will want in a cabinet. But it seems to me that Joe Biden has been in a particular lane as a politician, and it seems to me that his instincts would be in elevating people who can double down on his message of being an even-handed president, even while he is an unapologetic Democrat. I wouldn't be surprised to see if someone like a Chris Coons ends up doing something, though he just won his seat in Delaware. I've also been thinking about just this period of time. I mean, the next couple of weeks, he is not the president yet, but the current president has just left the golf course and really seems to be not focused on the remaining parts of the job. He's obviously focused on fighting the fact that Joe Biden was elected president. So I think there's going to be a huge vacuum, and Joe Biden's going to actually have a lot to do right now to fill that vacuum.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I do want to say something. I don't want to throw cold water on the whole notion of what Biden's going to be able to do. But progressives were very disappointed in the Obama administration because Barack Obama governed as a center-left politician. Barack Obama was not the wild-haired liberal that people depicted him as. He was center-left. He was very much in the mold of Joe Biden, even though their styles are very different and probably their personal politics are a little bit different. But that's how he governed. And the Republicans were as obstructionist as they could be once they got control of the Senate. I don't know what Mitch McConnell is going to do. He's got a real decision ahead of him.
You're right. He got one of the reasons why he partnered so strongly with Donald Trump was because he got so many judges onto the bench, never mind 3 Supreme Court judges. But maybe he'll look at Joe Biden as his former deal maker, and they can actually make some good policy for the country. Hope springs eternal. I know. Let's just be hopeful today. Come on, Jake.
Joe Biden wins this historic race for the White House and will be the 46th president of the United States of America. He and Vice President-elect Kamala Harris will speak live tonight, 8 p.m. Eastern. There's more coverage ahead before that, of course. Stay with us. Our special coverage continues with Anderson Cooper and Aaron Burnett right after this quick break.
Our trust has been broken in our leaders, in our institutions, even with some of our friends. And we are hurting. Now more than ever, we need each other to listen, to learn from one another, to rebuild those bonds. Because trust shows that we believe in the good in each other. It's what makes us human. And when we trust one another, that is when we can truly achieve great things.
Every adventure is better in a Hyundai with America's best warranty. That's better than Toyota, Honda, and Nissan. Now, get 0% APR financing on select models from Hyundai's award-winning family of SUVs. Visit buyhyundai.com today.